Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it, thanks. By the way, I also have a Luffy fan fiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description. A New Life by the Ethereal Lord. After a shocking discovery during his battle with Kaguya, Naruto gets transported into the DC universe with an unlikely companion in tow. Now he has to adapt to a world of caped heroes and villains, one of whom he may even know. I don't own anything Adios.
It has been 4 days since the phenomenon scientists around the world have only been able to term the split occurred, and while numbers are still coming in from across the globe, estimates put the total number of deaths caused by this event in millions. Researchers the world over have been searching feverishly for an answer, but as of right now, results are not forthcoming. Joining me now from National City is Kara Danvers and, my guest in the studio, Professor of Psychology, Dr. Hugo Strange. Kara, we'll start off with you. Thank you, Kat. Like you mentioned earlier, it has been 4 days since parents found themselves inexplicably separated from their children and, as was confirmed 2 days ago, husbands found themselves torn from the sides of their pregnant wives. In that time, the only thing that has been verified is the fact that, somehow, the world was split into 3 separate planes. Let's go with that. The world was separated into 3 planes of existence and all of humanity was sorted onto one of the 3. So, 4 days after the fact, we're still wondering what the heck happened and why, and we have no answers. The government clearly has no idea what's going on. The individual population has no clue, and what we have come to see as humanity's last hope have not said a word. Miss Danvers, if I may. Go ahead, doctor. Thank you. Much as I know that a part of his desires to cast the blame at the feet of the Justice League, I think we should face the reality before us. It is very possible that the League had no idea of how it happened. Reports have come in that there were telecasts on both the adult and children's planes broadcast by the League and their protégés, which leads me to believe that they were caught up in this as well. And that knowledge is, I believe, a major cause for the rising levels of fear seen through the major cities of the world. If the Justice League, seen by many as the world's saviors, couldn't prevent this from happening and, as far as we know, had no hand in resetting things to normal, then how does anyone know it won't happen again? How does anyone know that, should this happen again, it wouldn't be a permanent setting? That is the main fear, Miss Grant, Miss Danvers, and I fear that it will not be abating anytime soon. Atlantis, Arg, Calder grunted as he slammed into the wall, pain lancing up his spine. He had no time to nurse the pain, though, as he was forced to roll out of the way of a sword slash that scored a gash where his head had been. This is the vaunted Aqualad, his attacker scoffed as she dragged her weapon out of the wall, enjoying the wince the imagery brought to his face. Your time on the surface has made you weak. The last word was uttered in a spiteful hiss as she dived toward him, swords flashing through the air. It took every bit of skill he possessed to ward off her attacks. She fought like a whirlwind of blades, lashing out every second with either of her swords, every strike seeking his vitals. It was a testament to her own endurance that, in spite of the level of sheer ferocity, she never lost a step, though he did his best to stagger her attacks. He had just blocked an overhead swing when, out of nowhere, she snapped a kick right into his floating ribs. For the second time in about as many minutes, he was sent flying. You're boring me, Calder. She yawned as he slowly clawed his way back to his feet. I clearly overestimated. She was forced to break off her sentence when one of his water bearers was flung right at her face, prompting her to block it. The split-second loss of focus cost her as Calder shot forward, snapping the whip he had created from his second water bearer ahead of him to latch onto his thrown weapon. With a single deft move, he had the bearer back in his grip and he immediately launched an attack of his own, using the length and flexibility of the whips to keep her on the back foot, much like she had done with her ferocious attacks mere moments before. He kept the onslaught up, directing the tips of his constructs to snake past her blades toward her face, forcing her to focus on the constructs to the exclusion of all else, including the rubble he had strategically strewn around the battleground after each collision into the walls around them. Realization dawned on her the instant she stepped on one such pile of rocks just before her foot twisted, throwing her off balance. An instant later, she slammed into a wall courtesy of a hammer strike to the abdomen before being pinned there by a water construct. Do you yield? She glared up at him, past the shimmering blue blade hovering an inch away from her throat, but his eyes gave nothing away. Do you yield? The last word came with the feel of the blade being pushed into her skin. Not hard enough to break the skin, but just enough to prove the intent. Fuck it. She sighed and raised her hands in surrender, letting her own water bearers fall out of her palms. I yield. The constructs dissipated with little more than a thought and Calder grabbed a hand and helped her to her feet. Looks like I won, Holly. Yeah, no kidding. Holly groaned as she bent to grab her water bearers. My back hurts. You did not have to smack me so hard just now. Calder arched an eyebrow at his former ranking officer. Look around, Holly. Your back made only one hole in the wall, the rest are all mine thanks to you. The pixie-cut brunette just waved the point off dismissively. At least you won. That's gotta take the sting off some. Calder shrugged noncommittally. Really, though, that was one heck of a fight there. Holly commended as they walked away, activating the self-repair runes on the training ground. Where'd you learn to fight like that? What do you mean? You know, choosing to take hits while seeding the ground for your endgame. That was a brilliant move. Ah, that, Calder found himself scratching the back of his head in a manner reminiscent of Naruto's. Well, it's one of the things Maelstrom had me work on the team. I'm one of the more durable members, so he taught me to use that along with the mindset you helped me develop to wade into a fight seemingly without a plan while manipulating the environment such that, when the time is right, I can make a single, precise move to take out the enemy. Holly looked impressed. Well, I gotta say, that fits you to a T. Maelstrom's pretty good at figuring out the styles that fit people. Calder agreed as they turned towards Holly's apartment. While she had her own home further away from the administrative block, her rank in the military meant that she had a smaller apartment in the heart of the capital, to be used during times of need. He's been a huge help to us on the team. You know, Calder, as much as I hate the circumstances surrounding your visit, I've really enjoyed having you back here. Holly yawned as she walked into the apartment. You really should come visiting more often. Perhaps you should try visiting. Calder rejoined. You never seem to take a vacation unless it has been forced upon you. Well, Mr. Sun, Sand and Tans, every time I think of taking a little break, something comes along to screw things up. She shrugged as she ducked into the kitchenette. Case in point being this whole, world-splitting, nightmare. She took a peek into her cabinets and pulled out the makings of a quick dinner as he leaned on the doorway, watching. At least you were here to help smooth things out some. I suppose you might have a point, he conceded. Though I cannot understand why one such as the head of the Cowboy family would make such inflammatory comments against the surface world, even after our king's explanation. Holly just shrugged. Not everyone who kneels before the king likes, or even respects, him. Contrary to general belief, many of Atlanta's higher echelons, the powers behind the authorities' families like the Cowboy, for example, were not pleased by the return of our king. Many of them have always been and will always be of the opinion Ance was right. The surface world should be made subject to the might of the deep. She stepped away from the sink and bent over to get a pot. So, while they really can't make major moves against the king, they do their best to be irritating, and Opal Cowboy is the best at that. She stood up, carrying the desired object, and stared at him quizzically. How come you don't know all this? Calder looked sheepish. Well, I often focused more on the practical combat training with our king than the more diplomatic lessons Queen Mara tried to slip into our sessions. Holly just shook her head and said, that is so you, prompting a laugh from the young man. For the next couple of minutes, a comfortable silence enveloped the room. Holly's constant motion and energy as she prepared dinner was balanced out by the calm stillness Calder exuded as he just watched her work. I have a question. Something about the statement, the abruptness of it, or perhaps the manner in which it had been delivered. A calm tone with underlying hints of self-doubt and something more had Holly pause midway through her chopping to turn to him. I'm listening. A pause. Then, have you ever felt utterly outclassed? Normally, the brunette would have fired back with a witty comment along the lines of, every time the queen walks by. But she could sense a deeper meaning to the question. Something had happened that made him doubt himself. She turned back to her chopping board. Do you mind if I ask where the question's coming from? Calder sighed and slid down until he was seated in the doorway, his arm resting on an upraised knee and staring at something only he could see. During my time with our king, I was privileged to have been taught by some of the best minds in Atlantis. Lady Vinyaya, Master Damavoy, you. I was schooled in the art of combat by some of the finest warriors Atlantis has ever had before I set foot on the surface. I don't believe I think too highly of myself when I say that I was a good warrior as at the time I left. You're selling yourself short, Calder. Holly cut in. You're one of the best warriors I've had the honor of working with, and both Lady Vinyaya and the old butler would agree. Calder shrugged noncommittally. Perhaps. She scraped the contents of the board into the pan and stepped back as the oil hissed. Then, she walked over and sat opposite him. Calder? He glanced at her and just exhaled, prompting her to place a hand on his arm. Talk to me, Calder. I can't help if I don't know what's going on inside. He held the contact with her eyes for a few seconds before turning away, though not before she caught a flash of shame in his eyes. For the past few months, as Maelstrom and Shard have worked with us on the team, I've been feeling stronger and stronger than ever. My skills feel more refined and, in some part of me, I felt that, by proving myself, I have risen to the challenge of leading the team. But when Miss Martian shared her memories of the battle against Trigon with us, watching Maelstrom battle a threat like Trigon, watching him take charge of the situation in the presence of heroes like Superman and Wonder Woman, it makes you feel like you haven't taken a single step from where you were at the beginning, Holly stated quietly. No, it's worse than that. Watching someone whom you felt you were getting closer and closer to in terms of skills suddenly reveal the actual chasm between the two of you. It makes you feel like you've regressed. Like you have only stumbled around blindly, losing what little skill you had while they progressed. Neither spoke for a few moments, the only noticeable sound in the room coming from the pan. When I started out with the LEP law enforcement patrol, from before the merger, I went in with laser-like focus. I was the first female patrol officer in forever and I had the pressure of the depths around my shoulders. Everyone wanted me to perform well except the vast majority that didn't. By the time the merger came around and I joined the first contact squad, I felt like I'd done it. Like I'd ridden the beast and come down smiling. Then the default incident occurred and the default thing nearly broke me. She sucked in a deep breath and then exhaled through her teeth. It wasn't meeting with that hunter child or being kidnapped by that annoying off-worlder or even the subsequent events that followed that cut me. It was the fact that Commander Rude, the old man we'd always placed bets on when his bad habits would catch up with him behind his back, a man I thought was a relic of FCS past and a burden on our future, was the one to come pull my ass out of the fire. It was the fact that, watching him do his damnedest to succeed even then, years past his prime and to come out of it strongly, if he's so good now, just how good was he in his prime? For close to a month I was just there, stuck on that thought. Calder was entranced. He had known Holly personally for more than 4 years and had known about her for decades. Her meteoric rise through the FCS ranks, her exploits, her friendly rivalry with Commander Kelp, the only black mark in her otherwise spotless record was the default incident and, according to official records, she had done the best she could in a bad situation. He had never heard of this Commander Root before, not had he thought that one of the heroes of present-day Atlantis would have been struck down by such a gripping doubt. How did I get out of my funk? Holly smiled ruefully. Well, Commander Root yelled me into a private training ground, proceeded to kick my ass 6 ways to Sunday. He beat you? Oh yeah. Pretty nasty beat down too. Should have a scar or two from that fight. The memory brought a wistful smile to her face. Then, when I was too tired to move and on the verge of giving up, he propped me up on a wall, squatted, looked me in the eyes and asked, "How are you gonna prove that you're better than me if you quit now?" And, with that said, he left me there, bloody and bruised and my ego in ruins. That was it. As far as I was concerned, I was through. So, I spent the night compiling a pile of excuses and fitted them into a decently written resignation letter. First thing the next morning, I was ready to hand it over to Root. What happened? Holly smiled. What happened? Well, old Julius marches right into his office, sees me standing by the door and just grunts. You're here. Good. Drop that resignation letter and get out of here. You've cost us too much negative attention recently. And I'm standing there wondering, what the fuck? And then, out of nowhere, I hear myself challenging him. I'll only resign if, after 1 more year on the force, I can't wipe the floor with him. I'm guessing that you won. This time, the brunette snorted. Yeah, right. More like he took me back to school again. Old man probably died with a number of skills locked in that noggin of his. This left Calder bewildered. But then, why? Well, first off, the second time we fought, it was much closer than the first time. She explained, understanding the reason for his confusion. Second, well, I guess you could say that I grew up that year, became much more mature, mentally speaking. The thing is, during that year, I was determined to become better than him while he, as I thought then, wanted me gone. I was either given the shittiest of shit jobs or the toughest of tasks. Sometimes, he'd hide the second in the first. It was only years later that I realized what the commander had done for me. He had broken me down as far as I could go and, seeing as how my shattered pride still wouldn't let me give in, he was building me back up to be better. She glanced at him, saw the intense focus in his eyes, and knew that he was on the verge of understanding. The thing with feeling outclassed is, it happens. You'll always meet someone who's better in something than you and, a lot of times, they're so much better that it's not even funny. At that point, you have two opt-out and throwing a pity party and feeling so useless that you forget why you wanted to get better, or you can force yourself to go on. To keep practicing, keep getting better even if it seems on some days like you're not making any progress at all. Whatever you choose, you just need to remember something. Even if your target keeps getting better, if you keep trying, the gap will never grow larger than it already is. Better that than to let your target get so far away that you lose sight of even that, you know? Though he didn't say anything, Holly had the distinct impression that he understood and that, as far as she was concerned, was enough. Then, the smell of burning shrimp caught her attention. My dinner. Star City the Black Canary let out a groan of bliss as she bent over backwards, savoring the pops her spine made, before straightening up. Woo, nothing like laying a good thumping down on a few idiots to relax. She twisted her neck as far as it would go, releasing another set of pops, then turned to the alcove behind her. Don't you think so, Maelstrom? So you were waiting till you were done to call me out? The shinobi said as he seemingly melted out of the shadows. Though his hair was black as night, he was not in his Maelstrom attire. Instead, he wore a pair of stone-washed gray jeans, an off-white shirt and a black trench coat with the collar pulled up to mask the lower half of his face. The only part of him that wasn't taken off a drab palette was his eyes. They were their usual blue. I was afraid that you'd slipped up with how tense you were. Black Canary watched him carefully as he approached. Following Raven's completion of Trigon's prison and the subsequent sealing away of the warlord, the shinobi had collapsed as a result of him using his powers at such a high level of combat for an extended period of time. Shard had explained before they left. Now, 4 days later, he seemed to have recovered fully as she could observe no visible traits of weakness or fatigue in his motions, but she decided to ask for confirmation. "How are you feeling now?" "Back to normal, pretty much." He shrugged, though he had a slight smile on. "Shard told me that you visited while I was out of it. Thanks for that." "Hey, it's the least I could do for one of my brats." She laughed, glad that the young man she had come to think of as a friend was feeling much better. "You mind helping me secure these idiots?" "Sure." He grinned back, pulling a sheaf of paper tags out of his pocket. What did they do anyway? Canary collected a pair of the tags and proceeded to slap them on the bodies of the 2 thugs closest to her. She had no reason to ask as the shinobi had already demonstrated the uses of what he called warden tags to the team. You know, ladies walking down the road on her own. A bunch of idiots decide they can take advantage of her. I overhear the commotion and step in. Pretty routine actually. She called the police, almost certainly. Canary replied as she slapped a tag on another while he got the last 2. Like I said, this is pretty routine. She then stood arms akimbo and turned to him. So, why are you out here tonight? Pretty sure you didn't just drop by to check on me, did you? We'll talk. But first, let's get out of here before the police show up. Maelstrom replied, his tone setting off a few of Canary's mental alarms, though she didn't say anything about it there. Instead, the 2 cut through an adjoining alley to come out in a secluded space about 10 meters from where the thugs were tied up. From their new location, Canary gestured at a rickety-looking ladder and said, "Trust me, it's more reliable than it looks," before scaling it to the top. Down below, the shinobi stared at the ladder, glanced around, and took off at a flat sprint right up the wall next to the ladder. "Geez, don't you trust me?" He glanced at the woman who was now sitting on the edge of the roof, right by the ladder before glancing back at the offending piece of metal. He shivered. "I trust you. The ladder, not so much. I think you're just being a scaredy cat. I use this baby," she patted the ladder fondly, "on most of my runs and it has never failed me." "That just means it likes you," he rejoined. After a moment, he decided to, tentatively, place a hand on the ladder only for it to release a tortured screech that had him hastily pulling his hand back. "See? If I'd risked it, I'd probably just be a splat on the ground." The canary arched an eyebrow at him before bursting into laughter. "I should tell Batman about this. The great Maelstrom, the guy who pretty much held Trigon off to a standstill, is afraid of rusty ladders. If he's anywhere near as intelligent as people make him out to be, then he would be too." Though he sounded as lighthearted as she did, Canary felt there was something just a tad off about the way the statement had been phrased. "So, you were going to tell me why you're out here and not relaxing in bed?" "Yeah, about that." He tapped a finger on the space about halfway between them and, abruptly, all the sounds of the city's nightlife simply died away. Noting the questioning look on her face, the shinobi sighed. "It's a localized silencing seal. Prevents most sounds from entering or exiting the silencing field." "Seems pretty impressive." He just shrugged. "Some of my contacts reached out to me with intel that leads to some pretty disturbing news. Someone's preparing for a high-end offensive." That wiped away all traces of humor from her mind. "I'm listening." "Remember that moment when Trigon first showed up? The feeling of death that accompanied it?" When she nodded, he continued. "It's been hushed up real fast, but according to one of my guys, a number of Bell Rev's non-enhanced inmates were declared dead as a result of that, whatever it was. Conveniently enough, all the dead inmates had no known family members or associates." Canary connected the dots immediately and nodded for him to move on. "Now, strange as that is, I wouldn't have bothered you if another piece of information hadn't cropped up. One of the offshore Cadmus facilities shipped in a container of, among other things, cobra venom. That's no coincidence," Canary stated factually. "They're building an army. The icing on the cake is the timing. The shipment arrived 10 minutes before the split occurred. My guy says that the Cadmus crew took advantage of the ensuing confusion to load the venom onto a waiting van. By the time things had calmed down, the venom was well on its way to whatever distribution point they set up." A look of astonishment settled on the blonde heroine's features. "We suspected that the split happened to cover something up, but this goes far beyond anything we could have thought up." Maelstrom nodded. "They used the split to cover up the shipment of the venom while using Trigon's unexplained presence as a cover for their foot soldiers. You said that they'd have a distribution point set up," Canary pointed out. "Why not just send it straight to Cadmus? They know that, regardless of public opinion, the League still has eyes on them." He shrugged. "I was guessing when I said that, but it would make more sense for them to keep their assets away from themselves. Plausible deniability or whatever. Plus, I doubt that they'd want to strike at just one location, so a distribution point is logical." She mulled it over for a moment before agreeing that it was a logical angle to think from. "So, you gonna tell the Bat?" Her eyes narrowed just a fraction as she heard the slightly off way he had said that. "Do you want me to keep it from him?" The shinobi sighed and pushed a hand through his hair. You know, back home my mentor always warned me about having friends. You can't lie to save yourself, kiddo, not to those that really know you. Guess the old man was right. She stared at him but didn't say anything, choosing to let him continue on his own. He did. I'm not sure how much longer Shard and I can work with the team. She was not surprise showed on her face. Maelstrom continued. It's got nothing to do with the team. They're all amazing kids and I'm glad to be a part of their growth. It's the league we're growing tired of. The league? Canary shook her head, trying to figure out the reason and drawing blanks at each turn. Why? He breathed tiredly, like he had thought over what he was about to say and felt bad that he would have to. In a way, the heroine thought to herself, he probably had. We feel that the members of the league have lost their, I suppose conviction is an adequate term. The thought baffled and, she admitted to herself, rankled her. I don't think I understand you, Maelstrom. Each and every one on the Justice League is as dedicated to fighting for justice as we were when we started out on our own. The shinobi smiled sadly and shook his head. I don't think so. He quickly raised his hands, palm outward, to get her to hold on. Now I'm not saying you're not still fighting the good fight, Canary, because each and every one of you are doing that pretty much every day. No, what I'm saying is that a lot of you have lost sight of why you became vigilantes in the first place. Because, Canary, make no mistake about it. We are all vigilantes. For all the good the League has done, no one has made the motion to allow people to take the law into their own hands. And for good reason. She countered immediately. You have no idea just how many nutjobs there are, just waiting for an excuse to go on a killing spree because, in their twisted minds, they're trying to be heroes. The vehemence of her own words shocked her slightly, but the tiny smile on his face buried that shock under a layer of anger. I know people out there that use that exact same line of argument against the League, calling you public menaces that go out and assault people for no justifiable reason. He replied calmly. Of course, that isn't true, but it's an opinion. He shrugged. But, back to my original point, I have a question, if you don't mind my asking. Shoot. Do you have any idea how many people died in the past year due to fights and other forms of confrontations between the members of the League and their respective villains? Do you know that, in the years following the advent of superheroes, city centers with heroes have suffered greater collateral damage as a result of the presence of these heroes? She did. Each and every time Dinah Drake walked out of her apartment into her flower shop, she overheard countless arguments against the presence of the Justice League, majority of which toed the line he had put forward. Let's take Gotham. The Batman is seen to be the city's dark knight, swooping in to stop the psychopaths that run amok, right? Well, that's not how most of Gotham's citizens see him. To them, he's this guy who skulks around in the dark, fighting the same criminals he introduced to their lives, engaging in a pointless cycle that involves him catching them, incarcerating them, and the criminals pretty much walking out of the prisons. Though his voice never changed in pitch, Canary could feel the intensity behind his words, and she knew that he believed every word he spoke. Did you know the Joker's had the highest individual body count in the world for the past 6 years consecutively? Did you know that Josh has never been held behind bars for more than 3 consecutive months? Have you ever wondered how the Gotham crime families maintain their funding? Because, believe me, Canary, you're not the only one with a routine. And while Gotham may be the worst case, it doesn't mean Metropolis, Central City and others are exempt from some of these things. A morbid sort of curiosity nagged her to force the conversation back, to question him, but she kept quiet, mulling over his words and, to her own surprise, finding that a large part of herself had, at some point or the other, wondered the very same things. So many lives have been lost because you hold back. Because you force yourself to play by rules these criminals don't play by, rules they don't even acknowledge. Right now, hundreds of millions of people are in pain because the League didn't deal decisively enough with their rogues to give any newcomers nightmares about disturbing the peace. Maelstrom stood up and gazed in the bustling city. I'm not asking you to kill everyone who breaks the law. Hell, I don't want you going down that path. But you need to think of ways to deal with the problem at the root. Build a prison on the moon or something. He shrugged. I don't know how else to put it. The words are in my head, but I don't know how to explain it. He cocked his head, paused, then, the police have arrived to pick up those thugs, so I'll be heading home now. Naruto. He stopped just before dropping off the side of the building and turned to her. I'm sorry if I seemed accusing, just think about what I said, okay? We'll talk later, Canary. With that said, he dropped off the building, disappearing into the shadows of the night. Cadmus Annex, XX. Kennedy barked as he strode through the upper hallways of the Cadmus facility. God damn it. Where's that blue? Kennedy. Upon hearing the voice of Sumitha Banerjee, the head of security paused and turned the woman. Dr. Banerjee, I didn't see you there. You wouldn't have. The way you were moving like you had fire ants in your shoes. The facility's second-in-command stepped out of the room she had occupied and walked up to him. Is there something I should know of? It's a logistics thing. The young man shrugged. I haven't said a word yet cause I expected to have the reports waiting on your desk by now. What is it? We've received Director Desmond's cargo. I just need XX to get some of the G-Trolls to transfer them to the service elevator and get them into the director's workspace. The dark-skinned Indian laughed. You definitely should have seen me first. XX is working on shoring up Valor's mental defenses and smoothing out any wrinkles in the genome's initial programming. Kennedy's eyebrows arched. Really? And how far is he? Val, I mean. He's progressing much faster than we initially projected and showing no signs of exhibiting traits like the failed experiments. Sumitha's enthusiasm was almost infectious as she pulled out her datapad and, with a few taps, opened up a graph. Valor will be Superman's equal in every way. And the personality issues? XX has been working on them, she answered back. And, should he be unable to remove those flaws, Valor and I have developed a persona for him utilizes the flaws. Kennedy flashed a lopsided grin at the woman. You got everything planned out, huh? She spread her hands in a, what can you do, gesture. Cadmus takes only the best minds. Agreed. How urgently do you need XX? Kennedy waved her off. Don't worry, I'll get Lila to talk with the Genomorphs. They listen to her almost as much as they do Old Blue. Well, Sumitha said as she walked back to the door she had emerged from, you wouldn't be in this situation if you just accept one of the little guys to help you. And then, before he could say anything, she was gone. Kennedy smiled. I'll get you back. Lifting a finger to his ear, he activated his comms. Anthony? Boss. Perfect timing, I was just about to call in, the director just called. Subconsciously, the Cadmus employee found himself standing a bit straighter. Patch me into Lila. I need to talk to her. In a second, boss, right now, the director's on his way for a quick flyby. According to Andy, the chopper crew won't even have enough time to go take a piss before they're off again. It didn't take a genius to understand the unspoken message. Desmond had a message he wanted to pass across, something so important that he was willing to take a detour just so he could deliver it in person. He immediately headed right back down the hallway. Thanks for the heads up, Tony. I'll head up to the pad now. Patch me through to Lila, will you? Us stepping into the elevator when she responded. Lila, I need you to head to SB2. Get the Genos to move the crates in the LZ over to the director's space. Got it, boss. By the time the chopper landed, Kennedy was already awaiting the director. No issues in Central City, sir? He asked as the din from the helicopter's blades died out. None at all, Kennedy, the Central City installations are done. The older man exhaled. Is my shipment in? We're moving it into your workspace now, sir. Excellent. Desmond nodded. Now, I'll need you to prepare the holding cells from levels 4 to 6. We have some guests coming over. Guests? The board plans on moving into the next phase of business and what we're expecting will play a vital role going forward. Kennedy brushed his hand through his hair. I have a question. When Desmond waved him on, he continued. These guests, are they dangerous? Not to us, I've been assured. To others not aligned to our cause. Understood. Kennedy nodded. They shouldn't be problem. Alright then. Desmond stretched his arm for a handshake that Kennedy readily accepted. I'll head out now, hopefully we should be done by the end of the week. Alright, sir. It took nearly 30 minutes for Kennedy to find himself in a spot isolated enough for him to read the little note the director had slipped into his hand during the handshake. Oh boy, the boss is definitely going to want to know about this. Jump City, looks like the adjustments we made to the Hirishin worked. Shiho stated analytically, her pen out and scribbling on her ever-present notepad following the disappearance of the last messenger clone. We could stand to dim the flash upon reappearance, though. I'd prefer if we switched them up. Shikamaru replied as he began to look through the reports the clone had dropped off. Take away the flash upon reappearance but leave the flash upon disappearance. I'd say we remove the flashes completely. Michael suggested, his voice ringing out of the kitchen. Dad may have needed it to act as a pseudo-calling card, but I don't think it plays any role here beyond calling attention to our presence. You bring up a good point. Shikamaru agreed, never looking up from the reports. Nevertheless, I can understand why boss wants us to maintain the flash, at least for the disappearing part. Shiho shook her head and rested her hip on the edge of Shikamaru's desk. We'd be honoring Dad by doing that. I get that, I really do. Michael admitted as he walked back in with a beer and 2 Cokes. I know we're doing a lot of this on a just-in-case basis, but we still have to consider the fact that boss will be facing some stupidly powerful people. We shouldn't put him in danger because of what amounts to shallow sentiments. I mean, we've got the Rinnegan to honor Dad, and even using the Hirishin, modded or not, should count. The 3 not quite human beings descended into bickering from that point. Michael arguing the benefits of completely modifying the Hirishin while Shikamaru and Shiho argued against it. This was the scene Naruto walked into, having teleported over to the seal in the little bungalow's sparsely decorated guest room. I don't exactly like it, he sighed as he crashed face first into the beanbag beside Michael, but Michael's right. Should we have to utilize it in direct combat, having no visible sign of its use would be an advantage. So, Shiho prompted. Alter the seals to remove the flashes completely. Naruto affirmed bleakly, drawing concerned looks from the other 3 occupants of the room. Boss? Michael started tentatively as Shiho penned down his words. Are you okay? Shikamaru, who had known why Naruto had set out in the first place, turned away from the desk and faced the sprawled form of his boss. "You talked to her?" "Yup. It didn't go so well, in a manner of speaking." Shikamaru sighed as he rested his back on the edge of the desk, ignoring the bite of the wood. Upon noticing the blank look on Michael's face, and suspecting that Naruto was not quite ready to talk, he explained, "Boss decided to talk to Black Canary about our gradually declining trust in the Justice League." "It's not that we don't trust the League, though we certainly don't trust the Batman," Naruto said, his voice muffled by the material of his perch. "It's that we feel like they've lost sight of their goal. Kagaya and I still talked about it a couple of hours before I set out. It's like, in their bid to gain the acceptance of the world, the League has chose to handicap themselves. They have to play by the world's rules even though the criminals they hunt don't." "But that's not it, is it?" Shiho asked quietly. "The reason you're upset, the reason you're so torn up right now, it's not because of that." Naruto grunted, slightly annoyed that she had picked up on that so easily. It was to be expected, though. The four of them in that room, plus the other shadow clones and, well, mortal constructs he had running around, they shared a connection very few would ever understand. As different as they were in personalities and looks, they still bore a fraction of Uzumaki Naruto in them. He had run from Kaguya's questions into theirs and he had no clue which was worse. "Boss?" Michael called quietly. "We may be parts of you but we still can't read your mind." "It's the lying," Naruto finally replied. "I don't know why but I don't like lying to her, to Canary." The others were stunned. Perhaps it had something to do with the fact that they were not experiencing the life as he lived it but none of them had seen that coming. "Damn it boss," Shiho sighed, running her palm down her face. This complicates things." "I know. I don't know how it happened but I find myself wanting her approval." Naruto flipped onto his back and stared at the ceiling. "It just felt odd tonight, when I was talking to her about some of the things we've uncovered. Lying to her just felt so fucking wrong." This time, the others had nothing to say, Shikamaru turning to the desk to continue perusing the reports while Shiho drained her coke and quietly walked out. Silence. Then, "All right, that's it." Michael, following his declaration, immediately stood up and yanked Naruto up with him. Grabbing the shinobi's shoulders, the modified construct glared at the boss. "I need your help." "Wah. I've got someone who would like to walk again and since I can't do it, well, you interested?" At first, Naruto wanted to decline, to do little more than sulk. It was probably why he nodded to Michael. He needed to clear his head. Unknown location Vandal Savage and the Queen of Bialia stood in the observation bay far above the greenhouse, watching as Jason Woodrue, now known as the Floronic Man, got acquainted with their enhanced plans. "Well, Mr. Woodrue certainly seems proficient." Savage just smiled contentedly. "He is. And with Desmond's aid, the Scarecrow will have completed the installation of the pods within the next 48 hours. And the Count? He's flying in tomorrow, accompanied by Teth Adam. Things are coming together nicely then." "Indeed they are, Your Majesty." Vandal agreed, thinking over the progress Jinx had delivered regarding the hunt for Nirvana. Between Trigon's invasion attempt and the coming challenges the Justice League would face, well, they'd be too blinded to see the endgame until it was too late to be stopped. "Indeed they are," Mount Justice aloud, keening trill echoed round the cave's hangar, prompting a sigh from its sole occupant. "Look, Sphere, I know that I don't have the tools right to." Another wail. "Hey, it's not my fault we don't have your fancy tech on our backwater world, Miss Snooty," he snapped back, feeling a tad frustrated by her constant arguments. "Besides, you asked me to give you a checkup." With another sigh, Connor dropped onto the floor beside the highly advanced piece of technology and stared at the roof of the hangar. 6 days had gone by since the Trigon incident, 4 of which he had spent in a magically induced coma. He didn't really like it, the whole loss of time associated with the coma, but, as he stretched his left hand above his head and his sleeve dropped, the scars stretching from just above his elbow to his shoulder was enough of an explanation. Sphere let out a series of quiet beeps and trills, sounding very much like a concerned sister. Connor turned his upraised hand and patted her. "I'm fine, Sphere, I promise." He didn't recall much of how it had happened. He remembered fighting with the rest of the team to hold the demons at bay while Raven worked. He remembered the demons suddenly tearing away from the battle and then, nothing. Sphere beeped. "Yeah, can't say I'm bothered, though." He shrugged. "Canary said she'd explain what happened later and Kara's already called to make sure I'm okay." Then, a self-satisfied grin stretched across his face. "Plus, I think I'll be too busy getting you to trust me with your insides." The string of beeps from the Sphere sounded very vulgar. "You know, I still think it's weird how easily you two communicate." The sound of McGann's voice drew Connor's attention as the young Martian walked in and the sight of her, in a pair of dark blue shorts and a plain white top, was enough to take his breath away. "McGann," he swallowed the ball of spit that had magically lodged itself in his throat and stood up, ignoring Sphere's sly comments about his elevated body temperature. "Hi, what are you doing out here?" His heart skipped a beat as she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear while looking away shyly. I just wanted to see how you were doing. I haven't been able to spend time with here at the cave. Uncle Jean had me meet with the rest of the league so he could share my memory of the fight against Trigon. The Kryptonian clone, feeling a bit uncomfortable standing there, gestured to the spot he had occupied moments before. "Wanna sit?" He wasn't sure if it was just the light, his eyes or reality, but it looked like she was blushing. Well, if Sphere doesn't mind. The series of beeps from the alien device translated to a most emphatic "not a bit." She doesn't mind. Connor smiled as he sat down, the green-skinned girl joining him moments later. "So, has anyone told you anything about the fight since you got up?" Canary briefed me. Basically, Naruto played a pretty big role in stalling Trigon long enough for Raven to complete her spell. He sighed and leaned back to rest against Sphere. "Just when I thought I had a chance against him in our spars." "He didn't really have a choice," Megan said, defending the enigmatic blonde's actions. "And even with him pretty much going all out, Trigon was barely winded." Realizing why she had spoken, Connor immediately apologized. "I meant that he wasn't kidding when he told me that he'd up the training when he felt that I was ready." He then looked away, feeling abashed. "He tosses me around the sparring mat every time we fight." "Well, I think you've improved a lot, thank you." "So, how are you feeling now?" Connor turned away reflexively and bunched his fingers into a fist, feeling the muscles move. "I got scars. They're not very appealing." Can I see them?" With a sigh, Connor nodded and pulled the sleeve up to show the scars running up his arm. "They go on as far as my shoulder." He tensed up again when she took his arm and gently ran her fingers along his skin, tracing the outlines of the marks. "Oh Connor, when Artemis told me about it, I didn't think." The young Kryptonian was stunned when her head dropped and her shoulders shook silently, and it took a few seconds for him to realize that she was crying. She was crying for him. Dazed by the realization and staunchly choosing to not think about the possibilities, he pulled her into a hug, resting his chin on her head. At that moment, he realized just how important she was to him. They looked so wonderful together. Canary smiled at the image relaying from the hangar. Almost like a Lost Souls type of thing, and Connor is definitely a better fit for Megan when compared to Wally. Seated beside her, Cyborg couldn't help but look at her strangely. "Two things. Isn't it weird that you're peeping in on what should be a private moment? I don't see you looking away, and I can't shake the feeling of being a voyeur every time they blush or whatever," he retorted, though without any heat. "You do it like you're watching a TV soap. Plus, why do you care who ends up with who?" The blonde heroine leaned back into her seat and grinned at him. "Back to front? It's just fun. Plus, I ship McConnor over Megali." The look of utter bafflement on Cyborg's face sent her into a laughing fit. "You mean you've never heard of shipping outside its very obvious relation to maritime activities?" "Nope." After taking a few moments to get her laughter under control, Canary launched into an explanation of the term shipping. "And the name mash-up thing," she nodded. "All a part of the community. How did famous football star Victor Stone not know about this? You probably had girls shipping themselves with you during all the boring classes." The mecha human looked away and, in that moment, Canary saw the young man striving for his father's attention, yet choosing to do so in his own way rather than become a mere clone. She knew the answer before he even started. My dad had a way of looking at things that sort of made me feel lost. He had a plan for me, and when I didn't seem interested in his plan and wanted to do my thing, well, work took precedence. I guess I was too focused on getting him to see me for what I was, so I never had time to notice all the sailing ships around me." "Nice one." Canary smiled at his little joke before placing her hand on his shoulder, feeling the slight tenseness of the muscles beneath the skin. Marveling internally at the contrast between the mechanical parts and the little islands of his old body left. "Don't worry, I'll be sure to teach you all the little details you might have missed out on." The young man smiled, silently thanking her for her support. "So, you got any other ships?" "Don't I ever?" Canary leaned back. "Whether they realize it or not, I fully believe the Crest ship will sail." "Kree, Artemis and Wally?" Cyborg seemed baffled by the thought. "Don't they hate each other?" The blonde heroine just snorted. "Trust me, those two are one of the rare likes attract but after a period of hating each other's guts pairs." "You've really studied this whole shipping tea." The mecha human broke off his statement midway as he received a data packet from Batman. "Huh. Looks like Batman's got something for the team." He transferred the packet to the cave's computer and brought it up on the display. "Huh. Looks like Donna, Wally, Megan and are getting their second BLEN vacation. Cadmus, New Orleans. These are the results you asked for, Mr. Patterson," the woman reported as he walked into the records room. A copy had already been burned onto a disk. "Thank you, Monica." Kennedy rolled up his sleeves as he stopped behind her seat and leaned over her shoulder to peer at the test results she had up on the bank of monitors. He frowned as he noted a couple of details that Desmond would no doubt like to know of. "And these are the very latest from this facility?" "Yes," she young technician replied. "Is something wrong?" "Yes." He pointed out the details he had noted. "You work with testing, yes?" "Yes, sir." Those levels, the adrenaline levels are higher than the threshold we set for the users. Now, I'm no Alistair Crane, but if I recall correctly, the higher the adrenaline levels go beyond the set threshold, the faster the users burn through the venom. A look of consternation settled on the dark-skinned girl's face. That doesn't seem right, sir. You may be right. I hold no PhDs, but I'm pretty sure the levels are wrong, and that means they could spell potential trouble for the… Yo boss. The call snapped the Cadmus security director out of his focus, and he turned to see one of the men he had picked out from the headquarters to accompany him. Anthony, why are you here grinning like a loon? Ah, the Lady Markov summons you, boss. A faint look of annoyance crossed his face. Please tell Tara that I'm busy at the moment, but I'll be with her shortly. The grin on Anthony's face took on a shit-eating quality. Your loss, boss. With that, the grown-ass mercenary skipped out of the room. Not going to question what I just saw, Kennedy muttered to himself as he returned his attention to the monitor, seeking out any other discrepancies. However, his focus was broken not 5 minutes later when an apologetic Lila called his name. What? He grated out between tightly clenched teeth. Sorry boss, but Miss Markov really wants to see you. Tell her that I'll be with her shortly. Got it, boss? The redhead shrugged and walked away. Kennedy blew out a frustrated breath. God. Not even 3 minutes later, he heard the clack of heels on the floor and he wheeled about to give whoever it was a piece of his mind. Whirling around was as far as he went with that line of action. You know, you're quite lucky that I like you, Kay. He could only swallow thickly, his mind still in its reboot sequence in the face of the vision that stood before him. Because Tara Markov, in her slinky black dress with its dangerously plunging neckline and tastefully done makeup, was just that. A vision. I'll get the keys, he croaked hoarsely, prompting a smile from his partner. That's a good boy. So, why exactly are you dressed to the T's again? Kennedy asked as he drove the Audi out of the facility, having dropped off instructions with Anthony and Lila, whose grins were every bit as wide as they could manage. I mean, you didn't tell me we had an event to attend. Or is this a sudden call? Not a call, she replied as she stared out of the open window, enjoying the wind as it pulled at her hair. Silence reigned for a few moments and she turned away from the window to fiddle with the GPS. Go here. Okay. Kennedy shifted gears, glanced at the GPS and maneuvered the R8 around a lumbering lorry. On our way to Verdant, a nightclub? The blonde sucked in a deep breath and blew it out slowly. It's my birthday, hey, watch it. Sorry, he yelled back as he swiftly got the car back under control from his momentary lapse. Sorry. I was caught off guard by your announcement, is all. He glanced at her, saw the slight look of anxiety that marred her beautiful features and smiled warmly. Happy birthday, Tara. I know it's a tad late and I don't have anything to give you. I didn't tell you about it, did I? She cut in, though she had a small smile of her own. That's the only reason I didn't pound your head within an hour of our meeting this morning. Gee, aggressive much? They shared a laugh for a few moments and then fell into a comfortable silence. So, why club? I don't exactly celebrate my birthdays, something usually crops up, so when nothing came in by 7 I just went for it. I'd heard of Verdant during an op, so it was pretty much the only choice. Her companion didn't say anything for a bit and, for a few moments, she wondered if she hadn't read him wrong. Abruptly, he pulled away from the street they were on and turned into another. Where are we going? His grin was devastating. Equal parts boyish, charming and playful. Well, seeing as you haven't celebrated a birthday in quite a while, I feel the first point of call should be an excellent dinner and, as it so luckily turns out, I remember a nice little place tucked into a corner right around here. He pulled up in front of a classy looking place. We'll still head out for a night on the town if you want to, but I think you deserve a wonderful dinner first. He turned to her, leveling the full force of that grin at her. What do you say, Lady Markov? She stared into the depths of his warm brown eyes and felt her face heating up, so she turned away and plastered on a decently snooty look. Am I supposed to open this door myself? His grin nearly split his face. Happy Harbor. I don't care how you do it, Shikamaru, I just need it done, Naruto snapped as he drove into the garage. I just spoke to Perdita and, no matter how much she's trying to hide it, I could hear the pain in her voice, man, she's dying. Shiho dropped off the anatomy files you requested along with a sealed sample in case you need to experiment a bit. Shika replied. I'll get on with creating a viable source for it. Just let me know when you're ready so we can iron out any leftover details. Got it. Naruto nodded as he walked into the house and locked the door behind him. Talk to you later. The blonde threw his head back and let out a deep breath. He was feeling a bit stretched at the moment between the team, the Nirvana case, his actions running his growing spy ring, Toad Sage Publishing and number of other things, with Perdita's health and Paula's recovery being the latest additions. As things stood, he honestly just wanted to crawl into his bed and spend the next 2 days asleep. Goddamn son of a fuck. The colorful expletives drew his attention toward the kitchen, making him wonder what was going on. It was, quite obviously, Kagaya in there, but the kitchen had never been her forte. She'd always left there feeding to him. Screw you, Stuart. Her voice rang out again, sounding extremely irritated. Screw you and your fucking videos. This is not easy as fucking pie. Okay, now his curiosity was piqued. He couldn't sense anyone in the kitchen nor could he hear any voices, so why? His mind temporarily froze when he entered the kitchen. It wasn't the state of the room that caught him, though he was certain that if a tornado waltzed with a hurricane while being cheered on by a cyclone, they still wouldn't have created such chaos. It wasn't the sheer mountain of crockery piled up in odd places while were pots sticking out of the bloody spice cabinet. It wasn't even the smoke that billowed from the 2 pots on the cooker, from the oven, and wonder of wonders, the microwave. No, what caught him so totally off guard was the sight of Otsutsuki Kagaya, former avatar of the Shinju, the progenitor of chakra and the rabbit goddess. Standing in the center of the kitchen, back to him, swearing up a storm between hisses of pain as she shook her slightly bloody thumb. Somehow, in the midst of all the chaos, the sight of Kagaya in a pair of short jean shorts, a plain orange top and flip-flops, with flour splattered over her skin and what looked like batter dripping down her hair, was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He'd choose death before telling her that, though. So, plastering a grin on his face, he leaned on the door frame and coughed slightly, smiling at the way she stiffened like a board. Need any help? He knew his words would definitely hit at her ego, and he wasn't surprised when she spun round, bringing her batter-splattered glare to bear on him, giving him a flash of a tablet with what looked like a cooking tutorial still playing on it before she blocked it off again. I do not need any help whatsoever. He just glanced around the room and smiled as infuriatingly as he could. Right. She took a step toward him, aiming to be you of words, only to step into an innocuous little batter puddle. His Sharingan flashed into view as he tried to track her motions so he could catch her, while recording the hilarity of the moment for reasons. But, as often happens in such scenarios, he missed the almost transparent splotch of egg white by his feet. The collision was the thing of legends: flying flour, scattered hair, the thud of bodies finally coming to rest. I haven't greeted you since I got back, Naruto observed cheekily, staring into her eyes from his spot beneath her. Hi Kagaya, how are you today? Her tone could have frozen steel. Asshole. Delivery. A shadow clone proclaimed as it walked in, laden with shopping bags. Got all the stuff you asked for, boss, later. It had taken the 2 of them nearly half an hour to return a semblance of order to the kitchen, both working in silence for their own reasons. Naruto wasn't quite sure if she was still pissed off, and he wasn't ready to risk his head if she was, while Kagaya awaited a comment from him. Finally, when she couldn't take the silence anymore, she slapped the cloth she was holding onto the granite countertop and whirled on him. It's fine. You can say it. I completely suck at cooking. Naruto paused with the plates he was washing and cocked his head. First off, you don't sound like it's fine. Second, so what if you're not good at cooking now? You think I became good at it in a day? You couldn't have been this bad, she muttered with a scowl as she returned to wiping the countertop. I burned water on my first try, he replied cheerfully as he recalled the utter disaster that was his kitchen after his first attempt at cooking. I couldn't figure out when the water was boiled, so I kept waiting for a sign from the gods or something, and, when I got too hungry to wait, I yanked the kettle off, had it slip and fall onto my foot, and then, when I kicked it away, I spilled oil onto the burner. If Ayame hadn't dropped by to check up on him, he'd likely have burnt the house down. In light of his experience, Kagaya couldn't help but see things differently. Maybe you're right. Naruto hummed in agreement. And the worst part was that I was only trying to cook ramen. It started off slowly, an eyebrow twitch, a quirk of her lips before building into full-on laughter. You nearly destroyed your kitchen for a bowl of ramen? Hey, first try, remember? He shrugged, not at all bothered by her laughter. Kiba's had been worse anyway. The damned mud never let him hear the end of it. So, what were you trying to make anyway? I subscribed to a video tutorial channel to help me get the gist of cooking, so I decided to try the, what did she call it? The white-haired princess bit her lip as she tried to recall the source of her woes. Pot roast thingy with a serving of cranberry pie. The blonde dropped the dish rag and turned to her. Girl, you build a house from the ground up, pot roast and all right. No more staying out of the kitchen for you. You're gonna be with me whenever I'm cooking. Once again, silence fell. This time, it was Naruto that broke the silence as he hung the dish rag at the edge of the sink, the plates all washed. So, why were you in here anyway? I mean, the kitchen's pretty much been my place since we got here. It was, Kagaya sighed and shook her head, it was for you, actually. The answer had caught Naruto off guard, and the intensity of the emotions he could sense off her knocked him on his metaphoric ass. For me? Yeah. Shiho came around earlier to drop off some files and we got talking. Along the line, I came to realize just how much you've been piling on yourself recently. The team, Nirvana, the information network, and on top of that you're pretty much running the house by yourself. She rubbed her forearm bashfully. I just wanted to do this. If I could get it right, then I felt, maybe I could take this off your shoulders. The hits just kept coming. Throughout his life, he had never had anyone step in and try to take a responsibility from him just to lighten the load on his shoulders. People had always seen the side he showed them, and judging by Hinata's sorely misplaced infatuation. Many had seen him as the guy who never needed any help, someone who could shoulder the weight of the world if he had to. After all, he had the Kage Bunshin on his side. Now, in a foreign world, a woman he was only just beginning to understand had taken an action for his sake, expressly to help him. It took a few seconds for him to realize that she was still talking. I mean, yeah, cooking isn't my forte, but then I don't think there's much I can do around the house anyway. Kagaya rambled on, oblivious of his temporary space out. Plus, I've seen how at ease you seem to be when you're in the kitchen, and I guess I wanted to understand that too. Oh, the blonde trailed off as he thought of what to say, cursing his emotionally stunted self when nothing came up. Anyhow, I'll go wash this gunk out of my hair. Kagaya sighed as she walked out of the kitchen. Call me when you're ready to start cooking. Naruto could only watch as she left, trying and failing to put his thoughts into words. Unknown location. Zatanna's head snapped up abruptly, her focus torn away from the spell she was studying. Something had changed. A little disruption in the perfectly balanced energies of her home that triggered all her internal alarms. Someone who wasn't on the list had just entered the house. Quiet as a mouse, she rolled off her bed and crept to a poster of Avril that she kept hung up on the wall beside her wardrobe. Woes meht sedisni fo eht esua. She chanted softly as she rolled up the poster. A blue glow shone from a spot on the hardwood walls before spreading outward to show the complete floor plan of the house in blue outline. Her eyes were drawn to the two colored dots on the impromptu map. A yellow one that she knew represented herself and a rapidly pulsating red. The stranger was making his way toward her room. Leknak, she whispered as she dropped the poster back into its place, her mind racing. She wasn't certain who the stranger was, but, considering the fact that the last two to sneak into the house like this had been Woden and Felix Faust, she suspected that whoever this was likely had a spell ready to silence her. As such, she dove behind her bed and stretched her hand toward the door. What she was planning was risky, but if she could get it off, then she would have the drop on her opponent and could bring some of her heavier spells to bear. Silence descended on the room, a thick pressure that bore down on her like the weight of a mountain. From beneath she watched the doorway, waiting. A sliver of a shadow appeared at the edge of the doorway and grew until it loomed large. She waited with bated breath. The moment she saw a foot land on her carpet, she let off her spell. A bolt of raw power in the shape of an icicle flew out toward the stranger's foot. Mezith Anak. Her eyes widened in shock, she knew that voice. Now love, knees appeared on the carpet before a weathered face did, its owner peering at her with amused eyes. Is that any way to greet your uncle? Her responding grin had a giddy, almost schoolgirl quality to it. Uncle John. Hello Z. Mind getting out of there? This old man's back isn't quite what it used to be. 5 seconds later she was in his embrace, hugging the man she had come to think of as her uncle. Truth be told, John Constantine was the very last person her father wanted her relating to. He was an alcoholic, he smoked, had a very loose moral compass and was a shameless flirt. Yet, for reasons neither party understood, she liked him as much as he did her, creating a unique dynamic between the two that, to Zatara, reinforced just why his daughter wasn't ready for the outside world. After all, she hadn't left his protective gaze and she was already inexplicably attracted to the bad boy type. I should have known it was she pulled away from his embrace. You're the only person I know who would sneak into the house when Dad's out. He is, Constantine faked a sigh of relief. I was afraid I'd be caught. Zatanna scoffed. Like you'd ever show up here without scouting. For the first time since she had known him, every trace of humor disappeared from his face, leaving him looking a lot more worn out than usual. While I don't deny that, I was actually willing to show up here whether he was around or not. That'd be a first. The young magi arched an eyebrow. What's up? Ah, just the usual you know. He went for a casual, relaxed tone that would have fooled anyone that didn't really know him. Some idiots went looking for an ancient artifact that was wiped away from human history books. Zatanna walked over to her wardrobe and started rifling through her clothes. Sounds like you know what the artifact is. Indeed I do. And it was wiped from historical records for a bloody good reason, he replied as she pulled on a black leather jacket that matched her jeans over the blue blouse she had on and began the hunt for suitable footwear. Go for the combat boots I got for you last year, we're heading into some rough terrain. Let me see where I put them. She dug further into her wardrobe. So, are we warning them off or what? Well, they've already found said ancient artifact, we're just going there to play damage control. Let me help with those. He got down on a knee and helped her lace up the boots. You know, inspect the land, clear out any possible dangerous things strewn about recklessly, the easy stuff. Zatanna rolled her eyes as she grabbed her phone in her work bag. So very easy, Uncle John. You know something like this is why Dad removed you from the house's honored guest list. No, really? He scoffed as he pulled out his lighter and a dried twig from the inner pocket of his trench coat. I could have sworn that it was because I let a number of ravenous demons here that third time. Zatanna rolled her eyes as she scribbled down a note for her dad in her jotter. Fourth actually, but who's counting? She reread the contents of her note, saw that it was okay, and dropped it onto her bed. I'm ready. A flame jumped out of the lighter and descended on the twig. Any second now. And then, in a burst of smoke, they disappeared. Unknown location. How have things progressed? Vandal asked as he walked into the meeting room, the rest of the light bar one already assembled. Luck was on our side. The brain responded. The one referred to as the cyborg has not gained full mastery over his apocalyptian enhancements. As such, I was able to erase every last trace of our connection to the Cadmus project and create new threads linking it to the various members of the society. However, as it stands, I would recommend that we limit every trace of our cyber presence going forward. Is he that great a threat? Queen Bee asked. In person? No, not when compared to other members of the Justice League. Within the cybersphere, however, he has the potential to be every bit as powerful as Superman. The brain explained. And I have found no kryptonite for him. That is troubling. However, it has little effect on our short-term plans. Savage decided. Luther? Cadmus pulled through. The bald tycoon replied. The real Asian outfit has supplied us with the Count's alibi while the headquarters completed work on Project Durzad. Excellent. Manta has gone to alert the Kraken of the location of Nirvana. Within 48 hours, that phase should be complete. The Immortal smiled at the group. With the inclusion of the Joker and the Count's alibi being airtight, Project Injustice can be initiated. Any counter-opinions? How goes the legal aspects of our next phase? Cobra asked, his features shrouded in the shadows of the room. The majesty of our plans will be ruined if we mistime our commencement. Have a little faith in my abilities, Cobra. The Queen of Bialia answered. I have the United Nations on a razor-thin balance. All we need is a decently sized calamity to tip the scales and the legal aspects will be tied up swiftly. And with our mascot raising a banner, even the League will be forced to make a choice, Luther added. Indeed. Any further opinions? None of the assembled members said a word, so Vandal continued. Then we can proceed, Mount Justice. Honestly, I was a tad skeptical about your skill when you took over the company, but I'm a hard man to impress, Naruto, yet you've done it all the same. I'm happy to hear that, Isaac. Naruto smiled as he watched and called her spar in the training room. Glad to see that you approve of my smut. I honestly didn't expect to. Honestly, you got yourself a believer here, and I expect that by the time Gurren and Yukimaru's story hits the shelves, you'll have a lot more. Well, that's what we're hoping for. Well, I'll let you know when the design team are done with the cover. Later, boss. Alright. He pumped a fist into the air happily, knowing that he was a step closer to getting Toad Sage Inc. up and running. Well, you seem happy. Donna smirked as she walked in. Good news? Heck yeah. He grinned happily. My book's on its way to hitting the shelves. Wait. You right? Naruto did a decent impression of a bobblehead. How come I'm just getting to know about this now? Know about what? Wally asked, midway through a handful of chips. A perfectly manicured finger jabbed at Naruto. He's a writer, with a book on its way. The speedster blinked. Then he did so again. No fucking way. Hey, Naruto shouted indignantly. What's that supposed to? Guys, meeting. Now. At the same time as Cyborg's alert, Naruto's phone rang. The lighthearted atmosphere dissipated completely. I'll join you. Naruto nodded as he accepted the call and turned away from the two. Shikamaru? I'm guessing you haven't seen the news, so I'll be direct. The reply was swift and blunt. An encrypted mail was sent to the UN today. Its contents were that of a group making claims that they're responsible for the Trigon deaths and threatening a more direct assault if their demands are not met. Demands? $1 trillion? Proof? A plant thing was reported to have leveled a few blocks in Metropolis before going to ground. Literally? Alright. What's wrong? They're a dud. The group, that is, not the threat. We believe that they're a cleverly designed ruse. I can't explain it all, but we need to keep our investigations up. Something about the way the clone spoke had Naruto believing that there was so much more that wasn't being covered. Unfortunately, he didn't have the time to test the waters. Fine. I expect a full report later. Understood. The connection died and Naruto headed out of the room. By the time he slipped into the hallway, Batman had already begun the briefing. By the time the nearest League member could arrive on the scene, however, Green Lantern ran an in situ analysis of a few pieces of bark that must have splintered off in the frenzy. A holoscreen containing a rendering of a familiar atomic structure popped up. Cobra Venom. Stated distastefully. Indeed. The holoscreen with the venom was replaced by more and more until a complex pattern revealed itself, taking the team by surprise. So, the Bell Rev Riot, the Arkham Breakout, they were all stages in a plan? Calder asked, stunned by the intricate planning that must have gone into the creation of this plot. It seems that way. The Dark Knight continued as more screens popped up, each carrying live news feeds. These plant things have sprouted up across the world. Gotham, Metropolis, Paris, Lagos, Taipei. He was interrupted by the sound of static as all screens showing live news feeds were suddenly replaced by the snowy screens of static. Cyborg was instantly on the case. This isn't an isolated event. A signal's interrupting every radio and television signal the world over. The internet's beginning. A set of casual knocks echoed round the cave as a chilling voice drew their attention back to the holoscreens. Is this thing on? Little more than a gloved hand showed at first, but as the view zoomed out, it revealed an eerily familiar figure. Ah yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt your regularly scheduled mayhem to bring you this important announcement. The Joker's grin was every bit as demented as usual as he dragged the camera view to rest on a sight that had the team sucking in a deep breath in shock. From the Injustice League. Cyborg, already on it. The mecha human's reply was immediate, multiple screens jumping to life around him as he battled to trace the signal. Robin. Right here, stated as he joined in the race to locate the newly identified threat. The announcement rolled on, with an aristocratic-looking man stepping forward to continue from where his associate had stopped. Good day, people of the world. I am Count Vertigo, spokesperson for our little society. In the not-too-distant past, many of you experienced a great loss of lives. We communicated with your United Nations, claimed responsibility, but, well, they ignored us. The Count chuckled dryly, not a trace of humor to be found in his eyes. We gave them advance warning of the demonstration we unveiled in Metropolis, yet, once again, they ignored us. As such, we have chosen to take more drastic steps. Your cities are under siege, as they will thus remain until your governments agree to our terms. A sum of $1 trillion. Naruto, sensing that the announcement was seconds away from ending, requested a status report from the furiously working duo, to no avail. We understand how much you governments enjoy bandying about phrases regarding how you do not negotiate with terrorists, and we respect that. However, the longer you delay. The camera view shifted again, the Joker's insane grin taking up the entirety of the screen. The longer we get to have our jollies. The screens faded to darkness, the Joker's chilling laugh echoing long after the news feeds had returned. Did you get anything? The Batman asked, watching as Cyborg and Robin gradually slowed down their frenzied typing. A general area was the best we could do. Cyborg sighed as Artemis walked toward a holoscreen and called up a recording of the announcement, Louisiana. That's helpful. Superboy snorted sarcastically, earning a withering glare from Miss Martian and Troya. While his sarcasm is not appreciated, Superboy has nailed the matter head-on. Louisiana is too large an area to comb through, particularly when we're on a time limit. Especially not when we're going up against a gathering of these guys. Artemis pointed out as she transferred a still of the recording to the largest holoscreen. The Joker, Scarecrow, Woden, Floronic Man, Cheetah, Black Adam, barring the new guy. These are some of the League's most dangerous, heavy-hitting baddies all in a row. They are. The Batman agreed. So you had better have a solid plan to take them on, Aqualad. It took a few seconds for the Caped Crusaders' words to sink in, but the moment they did, the Atlantean youth's jaw practically hit the ground. You want us to go up against them? The League will be too thinly distributed taking care of the plant things to mount an assault against this Injustice League. The Dark Knight stated factually. As it stands, you are the only ones we can trust to deal with this situation head-on. He walked up to the Atlantean and, placing a hand on his shoulder, he stared into the young man's eyes. I have faith in your abilities, Calder. He then looked up and locked eyes with each and every member of the team. I have faith in all of you. You will succeed. Calder stared into the knight's eyes for a second longer before nodding firmly. We will not fail. Taking the unspoken cue from their leader, the team swiftly headed out of the hall to prepare for the coming fight. As Naruto walked, he felt his phone vibrate within his pocket and he took it out. The instant he saw the caller ID, a nagging suspicion settled itself in his mind. Perdita. Naruto, I don't know what is going on. The young queen sounded distraught, torn between worlds. My uncle swears that the man on the television was not him, and my trusted nobles swear that he is right there before them buon eyes. This Count Vertigo, he is my uncle. Perdita calmed down. He waved Kaguya off when he walked into their room, silently promising to brief her later as he tried to placate the disconsolate girl. If your trusted nobles swear that they are with your uncle, then you should have no reason to fear his loyalty to you. The light tasted like gravel in his mouth, but he knew that, for the sake of health, she could not afford to be overly stressed out. It is likely a coincidence that this Vertigo bears such a similarity to your uncle. Perhaps he seeks a way to desecrate your uncle's legacy. Just remember that those you trust assure you of your uncle's loyalty as we speak. Thank you, Naruto. Just thank you. No problem, Perdita. Just stay strong for me. Okay. I need to go now, but I will talk to you as soon as this is all over. The young queen breathed a few more thanks before the line went dead. What's going on? Kaguya asked as she walked out of their shared bathroom, already clothed in the skin-tight black bodysuit that formed the base for the rest of her shard outfit. Things aren't as they seem, he replied as he took her place in the bath, stripping out of his clothes in a hurry. Sheikah believes the Cadmus warm bodies will be activated today. Makes sense. She agreed. This is likely one of the main reasons they prepared the cobra venom. He also believes that this Injustice League is just a pile of crap. The real threats are still in the shadows. Guys, get out here. We've got a location. We need to head out now, he stated as he walked out, adjusting his bracers. I'll talk to Calder about the warm bodies. We'll discuss the other issue later. Understood. Present Bayou Bartholomew, approaching drop zone. Naruto glanced at the girl levitating off the ground beside him, seated in a lotus position and giving off a powerful, potent aura. He could tell that she was still adjusting to her recent power boost and, per her request, he was keeping an eye out for any malicious feeling energy fluxes as she focused on her meditation. Anything yet? Slowly, Raven dropped to the floor of the bioship, the purplish miasma surrounding her receding as she opened her eyes. I'm sorry, maybe if I'd had longer to get used to the increased power she gestured toward the jewel in the center of her forehead. Then I might have enough control to unravel the barrier. As it stands, the shield's too complex for me to unravel quietly. Don't worry about that, we'll just, Maelstrom, we've arrived at the drop zone. Miss Martian interrupted, her voice coming from the cockpit, setting bioship to standby. Understood. Just rounding up here as well, he answered before returning his focus to the girl beside him. We'll go with plan B then, you up for it? 100%. She replied determinedly. The shield breaker spell requires power and positioning to destabilize whatever barrier it goes up against. I've got the power, you just let me know where the target is. Just then, Miss Martian walked in, looking ready for battle, bioships camouflaged. He nodded to her and lightly touched the wall with the fingertips of his ungloved hand. She remembers the rendezvous? Yeah. Alright then. Remember the plan and don't take any unnecessary risks. He stood up as a hole appeared in the bioship's floor. That goes for you too, bioship, we can't risk you or we could be stuck here. He turned to the girls, noting the slight look of disbelief on Raven's face. We'll stay linked through Miss Martian's link, but we stick to mission-related conversations only. The girls nodded. Alright then, Miss M, alert the rest of the gang. Ray, let's go. And with that, the shinobi dived through the hole, falling toward a section of the swamp no different than the others, fingers blurring through a sequence of hand seals. Kaden. Kaikaku Shinto. A fist-sized ball of compressed, white-hot flames shot out of his mouth, streaking downward until it slammed into an invisible barrier, flames exploding outward violently. Raven, you're up. The young magic user was by his side in an instant, a tiny orb of dark light hovering before her outstretched arm. Shrock. The orb responded to her command, drawing on her considerable magic reserves before lancing forward in a streak of light that shattered the barrier that had been put up. As always, Batman's information was spot on. Where there had been nothing but marshes and vegetation now stood an impressive, dome-like structure of metal and glass. They had time to build something like this on the side, Kid Flash asked in wonder. For how long had they been planning this? Now standing on the dome with Raven by his side, Maelstrom looked into the structure, his keen eyesight easily identifying their targets. Get ready people, here they come. Intruders. The pained cry caught the attention of his associates, each of whom immediately snapped to attention only to see their resident magic user doubled over, gripping his head between his hands. They couldn't understand it, but the feedback from the shattered barrier had traced the path to the source of its power and slammed into Woden like a train, leaving him reeling from the impact. What happened? Vertigo demanded, instantly on guard. The barrier I put up was shattered. Woden grunted as he struggled to regain his mental equilibrium. A brute force method rather than a precision slice. An amateur job? Cheetah asked, to which the sorcerer shook his head. No, this is the work of a desperate person. The heroes, then. Black Adam growled, a black scowl on his features. Or their little band of sidekicks, Scarecrow hissed. Vertigo made a decision. It doesn't matter who it is. We take them down, hard. My definition of fun. Cheetah smirked before letting loose a bestial roar and charging outside, eager to hunt. Floronic Man, Joker. You two will remain here and coordinate the attacks on the cities. Vertigo commanded as Scarecrow followed their female associate. Adam, give them a little boost him? The champion nodded and, in an impressive display of sheer magical might, summoned a humongous bolt of lightning that was immediately absorbed and redistributed through the control plant via Woden's sorcery and their benefactor's technology. Keep the carnage going. Vertigo ordered before striding out to meet the intruders, Woden and Black Adam flanking him. Their plan had been based on simplicity. While the shinobi, Raven and Miss Martian took down the barrier, the rest of the team would lurk at a safe distance until a signal was given. As such, the moment Maelstrom gave the warning, Aqualad surged through the waters of the swamp, swiftly swimming toward the now revealed structure before slowing down and hiding within the marine plants. He watched as the feline-like cheetah dashed out of the building to engage Troya while Miss Martian's attempt to ambush the Scarecrow failed and she was forced to back away from his viciously swinging hook. He didn't attack yet, though. No, his target was yet to reveal himself and so he needed to conserve his strength for what would likely be the most difficult fight of his life. Suddenly, a line of displaced water jumped into the air even as the skies lit up with a myriad of elemental and magical attacks. More pertinent to him, though, was the figure that had tried to blindside Troya, his outstretched fist barely parried by Superboy before the genetically engineered clone slammed a kick into his opponent's chest, blasting him backward. Black Adam, a villain some thought of as being as powerful as Superman himself, had just entered the fray. "Aqualad, let's go." The message came in just as Superboy launched himself into the air, his focus on the ruler of Kondak, and the Atlantean moved as well, channeling his magic through his bearers to create a fist of swampy water that rammed into Adam's back, sending him up, right into Superboy's dropkick. The fight was on. Racing, Artemis hissed in annoyance, doing her utmost to not let go of her mount. A million insane ideas cooked up and we went with the one that had me literally being piggybacked. "I really don't see what you're complaining about," Shard groused as she shifted her arms to maintain a firm hold of her rider. "You're not the one doing the piggybacking while climbing up a wall of glass while also maintaining a camouflage technique. Trust me, you're getting the better deal here." "You're thinking short term," the archer fired back, flinching as a bolt of lightning strayed close enough to make her hair stand. "You're not the one who'll have to live with kid my mouth moves faster than my brain's constant reminders that you were piggybacked on a mission. Damn it, couldn't Robin get the kiddie treatment?" Shard almost felt bad for the blonde upon hearing that. Knowing Wally as she did, Artemis was likely spot on with her worries, unfortunately for the archer. The mission comes before personal preferences, and while Robin could have been in your place, you admitted that he's better at stealth and would find it easier to sneak in than you would. Shard shrugged as she made it to the top of the dome, the outgrowth of the plants looming ahead. "Kid Flash won't be a problem. I'll personally have Aqualad and Maelstrom smash that into his skull if that'll settle your nerves. Now get off." Artemis didn't wait to be told a second time. The instant she was on her feet, she crossed the few feet between themselves and the plant and studied it. "Alright, how do we get in?" "I originally thought of climbing down the plant, but up close, I'm not sure I'd want to risk being so close to something that can crush me like a soda can." Shard frowned. The alternative essentially renders our espionage attempt pointless. Artemis had come to know the princess quite well in the past couple of months and she knew that Shard rarely stopped at two ideas. "What's the third idea?" "It's a slight adjustment of the second." Artemis, thanks to her background, was often able to tell when someone avoided her questions. "I won't like it, will I?" "Not unless you've changed your mind about being piggybacked." The archer cursed up a storm as her partner got to work. The KV-enhanced plants were a joy to control, Joker believed, not just for the sheer carnage they could wreak but for the multitude of little modifications that made spreading laughter such an easy task. His fingers danced like the deranged puppeteer he was, conducting an unholy symphony of destruction that the heroes around the world were hard-pressed to stop. Destroy a plant here and unleash a cloud of Joker venom into the air. Burn a vine there and release a host of deadly scarecrow spores. Blast a plant to shreds and face the wrath of a nuclear meltdown. And that's saying nothing about the KV thugs running around down there and making things much more difficult for the League of Super Shits. The madman cackled with insane, sadistic glee. This was gloriously marvelous. From his perch within on a throne of vines, the Floronic man could only marvel. While without his help the whole plant thing would fall apart, the man once known as Jason Woodrue knew that without the Joker's insanely devious mind, they would never have attained the level of carnage that they had. "I must say that I am impressed, Joker. Very few can seamlessly juggle multiple scenarios the way you do without losing track of any aspect. It's an acquired skill." The Clown Prince smirked as he twitched his fingers, sending Captain Atom flying in Taipei before mentally switching to Metropolis and unleashing another storm of scarecrow spores into the air. "Juggling my multiple personalities started me off, but the bat himself helped me hone this." The last phrase baffled the Floronic man. "I thought he hated you. How could the bat help you?" Another twitch had Wonder Woman plowing through a trio of buildings. "Ever gone up against him? A single, linear plan will never work. He's that intelligent, so the only way to get what I want is to create a complex web." The Floronic man was stunned. By creating a plan with multiple layers and intertwined aspects, the Joker would almost certainly achieve some of his goals, if not all of them. Very. His words were cut off as, out of nowhere, a trio of arrows sprouted from his chest, a quartet of beeps ringing out in stereo before he was consumed in a fiery explosion. At the same time, the Joker was only barely able to twist around the spike that flew at him, years of reliance on his instincts the only thing that saved him. It was only a momentary reprieve, though, as a woman in a dark outfit dropped lithely onto the ground beside him and instantly launched into a complex series of thrusts and jabs that, with those spiky protrusions in her hands, would have ripped holes in him had he not dodged. A few feet away, the Floronic man pulled himself together from a new mass of plant matter, his consciousness having departed his former body the instant the arrows impaled him. "You shouldn't have done that, girl," he growled at the archer, sending out mental commands to the plants that surrounded him, not while surrounded by plants. The ground beneath her erupted as vines of varying thickness lashed out at her, attempting to ensnare her. To her credit, the archer was swift enough to dodge the initial attempt and then, in an incredible display of skill, she latched onto a vine, using it to dodge 2 more before leaping off, twisting between another trio. They were at a stalemate. She couldn't get another shot off, but he was unable to snag her. Gotham. While most of the population of Gotham ran around screaming their heads off, Pamela watched with a detached interest as the plants, which she could tell were enhanced in some manner, wreaked havoc. The scientist within was impressed by the plants. To create such and manipulate them required a unique form of biotechnology that probably wouldn't hit the mainstream market for years, a decade at the very least. It would require a control point, from which the mastermind could manipulate the rest of plants without being too close, and as for the plants themselves, well, those were simply marvelous. The villain inside was impressed by the degree of thought that had gone into this. It didn't matter how much the heroes tried. And she had spent the past hour and a half simply watching them. Lives would be lost and the property damage would be tremendous. It was an excellent plan to get things done. Wreak havoc with the plants, split the hero's attention with a bunch of bruisers and turn an already panicking crowd hysterical with liberal applications of powerful toxins. Perfection. The woman she had once been, the Pamela Isley, from before the incident with Woodrow, quailed at the needless destruction. So many lives lost, and for what? Money? Recognition? It was sickening. The most prevalent thing she felt, though, was disgust. As a champion of the green, she was connected to nature on a level that many would never get to experience, and even depowered as she was, she could still feel the agony of the plant. It had been warped beyond natural limits, enhanced by something that should never have been created and controlled by a technology that rested in the hands of a madman. She suspected that, had she still been connected to Inashe, she might have been willing to overlook the corruption the plants suffered in order to sat her desire to punish mankind. But now, I just wanted to understand why you chose to become poison ivy. Whatever influence Inashe has over you, I don't believe that she forced you to choose that path. Not the Pamela that I saw. Now, she wanted to put an end to this madness. The stunning redhead turned to her companion, once again impressed by how calmly he sat, watching the world fall apart around him. Of course, seeing as he was connected in some manner to the one who had essentially put a lid on her abilities, it wasn't a big surprise. I need Mael Whalen arched an eyebrow, though he never took his eyes off the city below, their vantage point atop Gotham Tower allowing him to observe and mentally direct the few clones he had running about on where to go next. That's a pretty bold request. I can concoct a counter for the Joker venom and the Scarecrow spores, she replied calmly. With my powers fully returned, I might even be able to wrest control of these plants long enough to neutralize the toxins within them. An even bolder claim, too. He channeled chakra to his feet to hold him to the building as a minor shake rumbled the earth. As the quake died down, he directed a pair of clones toward a crumbling building a few blocks away from the center point of the attack on Gotham. And how do I know that you won't just attack me and run away? Her reply was curt, bordering on rudeness. You don't. Michael sighed and turned to her, his gaze boring into her. Naruto, as a result of his experiences, had grown adept at getting a decent read on people, and while his negative emotion sensing ability had been thrown out of whack since his absorption of Sasuke's Indra chakra, he was still damned good at it. Michael, as well as each of the boss's clones, had gained that skill as well. Turn around. He sighed as he stood up. When the redhead kept glaring, he rolled his eyes. You want them back or not? Be careful, she warned as she turned, anticipation building in her chest. Yada yada. He rolled his eyes again and then held up a hand. Get ready. Before she could say a word, he lifted her plain green t-shirt and pressed a thumb to the base of her spine, channeling his chakra to temporarily undo the seal that restricted her access to the world's natural energy store. Most others would have shouted or jerked or had some other physical reaction to having the full breadth of their powers returned to them. Pamela's only reaction was a soft, satisfied sigh as the voices of her children poured in, filling her mind with their thoughts. For a few seconds, nothing else mattered to her as she basked in the warmth her children said to her, feeling the void in her heart slowly being filled. When she opened her eyes, her irises, which had been a dull green that reflected her depowered status, shone brightly. And then she slapped him. That's for keeping me restrained, she hissed before jumping off the side of the building, a mass of vegetation rising to cushion her fall before speeding toward the center point of the attack. Bayou Bartholomew Maelstrom's fingers were an ever-moving blur as he ran up the side of the dome, staying ahead of Woden's spells by mere inches. He found it odd how easily the sorcerer was able to hold off both himself and Raven when, according to Cyborg, Woden was a rung or two beneath Clarion. Could it be that the witch boy was toying around that night? He wondered as he pumped chakra to his feet and leapt straight up, twisting around a sickly green spell that collided with the others he had been running away from. Another burst of wind chakra propelled him toward Woden as he unleashed his technique. Raiden. Chodenjibo, a bolt of lightning shot out of his outstretched arm with an explosive retort, lancing toward the floating sorcerer. the recoil of the A-rank technique throwing Maelstrom to the ground. It wasn't a problem for the shinobi, though, as he simply tucked himself into a roll to shed the momentum before kipping up to his feet in time to watch his technique slam into Woden's shield, forcing the sorcerer back and even splintering the shield but ultimately fizzling out before the barrier gave out. Impressive spellwork, young man. The sorcerer complimented as he mentally diverted a portion of his constantly replenishing reserves into strengthening his shield, internally grateful that the light had chosen to build this on a major ley line. His fight with the boy below had been energy-intensive and, judging by the amount of power she was slinging around her cell, holding the daughter of Trigon at the same time would have wiped him out otherwise. As soon as the shield was fully strengthened, a quintet of magic circles sprung to life around him. You fight well and your spells pack quite the amount of power into them. At the very least, you're certainly more skilled than the daughter of Trigon whom I expected more from. Tell me, who trained you? Wouldn't you like to know? The shinobi taunted, not bothering to correct the sorcerer's mistaken assumption, before sprinting away, dodging a hail of spells. Aqualad, Artemis, anything? We're stuck. Artemis replied, even her thoughts sounding strained. Robin's kept Joker occupied since he got here, but Floronic Man's keeping Shard and I away from the central controls. Things are not looking any better here. Aqualad's terse reply had the shinobi gritting his teeth. Superboy and I are barely staying ahead of Black Adam's punches and Troya's barely holding out against Cheetah. This isn't working. We need to switch tactics, Miss M? A little busy. Just patch everyone, done. Good. Guys, we need to switch things up. Robin, Shard, Artemis, find your way out of the dome. As soon as you're out, Shard, take over from Troya. Understood. Switching places with a tree branch, Maelstrom was able to buy himself a bit of room to fire off a water dragon before sprinting away from his now compromised cover. When she takes over, Troya, join Superboy and Aqualad to keep Adam busy. KF. Disengage from the count and have Artemis take over while you and Robin tackle the Floronic Man. I'll be waiting, Birdbrain. Good. Miss Martian, you keep the Joker occupied while Raven deals with Scarecrow, then both of you take out the crazy clown. I'll deal with Woden. Oh, are you gonna go golden on his ass? Kid Flash piped up, eager to see the shinobi's chakra cloak. Not if I can avoid it. Let's go, he ordered before vanishing in a swirl of leaves, reappearing an instant later with his right hand pulled back, fist covered in crackling electricity. Raiden. Iakuzuki Hakai. The sorcerer's shield was no match for the shinobi's technique. The lightning current, fueled by Maelstrom's massive reserves, overpowered the barrier in seconds before making contact. Woden's agonized scream drew the attention of his associates, forcing their attention away from their opponents for a split second. That was all the team required. Raven exploded out of the severely weakened cell Woden had kept her in, her eyes blazing with power as she locked onto her target. Incantare. Templum Incendiar. Miss Martian, who had dived into the ground the instant Woden's scream pierced the air, was able to avoid the sudden explosion of flames that erupted around the Scarecrow, swiftly creating a miniature Greco-Roman-styled temple around the villain. The Martian was not idle though, using Robin's thoughts as a homing beacon. She had slipped into the dome and, as soon as an opportunity presented itself, grabbed the Joker and flung him out of the dome. That was all Maelstrom saw before flipping away from Woden's form, eyes narrowed as he watched the earth around the sorcerer rapidly wither. I'll kill you. The sorcerer roared before unleashing a multitude of spells at the shinobi, some flying straight while others branched out in an attempt to catch him in a pincer maneuver. It was, in the end, a wasted effort as the shinobi simply vanished from the spot and reappeared behind the sorcerer amid a swirl of leaves. The last thing Woden heard was a quiet, Raiden, Jabashi, before darkness took him. With his opponent down, Maelstrom glanced around, taking in the other fights as he went. Raven and Miss Martian were done with their targets, the Joker and Scarecrow both trapped in chunks of solid rock, and both had joined the fight against Black Adam, playing to their strengths and supporting the frontline fighters. Artemis was having an easier time going up against the Count than Kid Flash, as she didn't need to get into the vertigo field he projected to attack him. Shard was HT Cheetah even if her clothes were suffering for it. Though the villain was a slightly better fighter and certainly much faster, the gaps were covered thanks to Shard's durability and the sheer number of weapons she could bring to the fight. That left the dome. Just as he was about to race into the structure, a memory blossomed in his mind. It took about 2 seconds for him to determine its origins and half that to review its contents before vanishing into the wind, reappearing not a second later at the base of the gargantuan plant, his view of the battle between Robin, Kid Flash and the Floronic Man obstructed by the plant. Knowing that he had not a moment to spare, he lifted his thumb to his mouth and tore off a strip of flesh. As soon as the first drop of blood appeared, he dragged the digit across the back of his left hand, some his sealing supplies. He caught the ink pot in his left hand, the brush in his right, and by the time the puff of smoke from the sum had cleared, he was a third of the way through the seal. I'll have to thank Michael later, he mused as he added the modified injection seal to the secondary layer of the seal. His design is flawless and helps me cut back on time." According to the memories he had received, Michael had undone most of Poison Ivy's restraints, allowing the woman to support the heroes in a way only she could. She had obtained a large splinter of the enhanced plants and swiftly retreated to an old base/lab of hers where she swiftly tore into the samples and figured out the makeup of the cobra venom within the plants. From there, it had been a walk in the park for her to devise a serum that would forcefully neutralize the venom in whatever form it was encountered. A quick field test in Gotham 1 that left the plants there dormant in seconds and the enhanced brutes vomiting had Batman green-light its mass production. Now, all he had to do was get the serum into the control plant and it would theoretically transmit the dormancy effect to all its offspring, allowing the heroes a significantly easier time mowing the lawn, as it were. Done. He reviewed the seal once more, looking out for any errors in execution rather than design flaws. Confident that there were none, he sent a mental signal to Michael via the heart link technique and, not a second later, a jug containing about half a liter of a vile-looking and even worse-smelling liquid appeared in his hand. Finally set, he held his right hand up in a half-ram seal and activated the seal. Fuinjutsu. Sodei Jinsei. A single portion of the seal glowed blue. Most would have considered that a failure or a sign of an error. Maelstrom simply lifted the jug and poured its contents on the spot, utilizing a bit of chakra to keep the serum restrained to that singular spot. Enough. The roar of anger was accompanied by a powerful, earth-shaking tremor that would have spilled the serum had he not been manipulating it with his chakra. "Shit. Gotta hurry," he whispered urgently, frustrated by the new development and the knowledge that he simply couldn't go any faster. After what seemed like ages, the rest of the seals came to life. Slowly at first before growing faster as time ran on, beginning with the absorption seals that pulled the liquid into the rest of the seal. By the time he finished pouring the serum, the injection seals had begun to push the serum into the plant and the effect was clear. From the section upon which the seal lay grew a rapidly expanding area of sickly yellow and the few branches and leaves on the tree sagged as though they had abruptly been sapped of every bit of energy within them. That was one mission objective down. "Superboy, down," Troya yelled as she zoomed in, fist cocked back and ready to fly. It was a risk, yelling out a warning like that, but they were desperate. Black Adam had taken everything they had to give and then some. That they were even alive was solely because they had been able to keep the villain off balance and he was rapidly catching on to their tactics. Superboy's back loomed as she flew and, for an instant, she feared that he hadn't heard her cry. Then, he moved to the side and Black Adam's mug was inches away from her face. It was only later that she would realize that the young Kryptonian had yanked on the villain's fist before sidestepping, propelling Adam toward her. Her fist shot forth like a bullet, slamming into Adam's jaw and sending him crashing into the ground. Off to the side, Aqualad hammered away at the villain with a pair of gigantic maces, pushing him deeper into the ground with every blow. "Are you okay?" Troya asked as she noticed how Superboy seemed to favor his left arm over his right. "Your arm is fine," he replied curtly as he ripped off a part of his shirt to swiftly tie it around his injured forearm. "It's a clean break. You need enough." The earth rumbled beneath their feet, throwing them back as Black Adam smashed through Aqualad's constructs and sent the Atlantean into unconsciousness with a single blow to the head. It was with a heart of terror that Troya watched the ancient warrior rise into the air with Aqualad's limp body tossed casually at her feet. "Your insolence ends here." 4 words. And the team was decimated, with the control plant dormant and Michael's confirmation that the broadcasting of effects had worked as predicted. Maelstrom had swiftly slapped a tag with a reworked version of the seal he had used on Poison Ivy on the Floronic Man, leaving the man paralyzed. As soon that was done, he had checked on Robin and Kid Flash before racing out. Only to freeze the instant he appeared in the doorway. Most of the villains were unconscious, secured to a tree by what seemed to be one of Raven's spells, the only ones missing being the Joker and Black Adam but the team. Superboy was unconscious in a tree. Troya and Aqualad were a heap of insensate bodies. Artemis was clutching her forearm, groaning in pain even as she dragged her body across to where Miss Martian lay unconscious, patches of blackened, smoking flesh blatantly obvious on her green skin. Shard was standing over Raven's body, Byakugan deactivated and right arm dangling uselessly at her side, glaring at the one before her. He could see the golden lightning wreathing Black Adam's fist, like a Chidori, ready to cut her down. Reality flickered. Robin and Kid Flash abruptly found themselves standing on a small patch of land a few meters away from the larger islet where the dome was. Around them lay the broken bodies of their teammates. In that same instant, Teth Adam found himself shooting into the air, pain radiating from his jaw like he hadn't felt throughout the fight with the children. Before he could right himself, a second blow smashed into his back, then his knee, then his groin. And then there was only pain. To Robin and Kid Flash who were watching from the islet they had been placed, it looked like a stun grenade had gone off in the sky. A bright, sustained light surrounded the continuously jerking body of the villain as the air rumbled with powerful thunderclaps. To Black Adam, he had been beset by a multitude of men wreathed in golden flames. their blows rattling his bones and tearing his muscles. Then, all but one of the golden men flickered out of existence, the one left bringing his foot down in a brutal axe kick that sent Adam hurtling to the ground, bouncing off the earth before being driven right back by the golden man, his abdomen screaming as it was assaulted by a magic sphere of some sort. For the first few seconds, pain was all he knew. Agonizing, torturous pain that permeated his very bones, his skin continuously being ground away by the magic sphere. Then came the burning sense of indignation that swiftly distilled into pure rage. How dare this insolent fool? He was Teth Adam, the god king of Kondak, and, torn from his world or not, he would not stand to be defeated. Shazam! The air trembled and the earth quaked as the skies above spat forth a bolt of raw CTED instantly, diving away as the lightning screamed down, and Black Adam swiftly did the same, escaping mere milliseconds before the lightning hit. When the dust settled, the two men stood with nearly 100 feet of blackened earth between them. "You will regret that, boy." Maelstrom vanished, reappearing behind Adam instantly, with his fist flying. The Kondaki king was up to the task, though, moving the very instant Maelstrom had such that the shinobi's fist met air. At the same time, Adam responded, his left arm coming up to clamp down on his foes only to grasp air himself, prompting the two to separate, if only for a second before clashing again. That was the tone of the battle for what seemed like ages. One would attack, the other would dodge and try for what would ultimately be a failed counter. Even Maelstrom's manipulation of the elements did little to change this. What techniques Black Adam couldn't dodge, he simply powered through. Flames were of no use as was water. Lighting he simply intercepted with his own. Earth he smashed through, and the sharpest of wind blades left what amounted to paper cuts. To Kid Flash, Robin and the rest of the team who had slowly regained consciousness, it was like watching a battle between gods. Yet, as they looked on, it seemed like the scales were tipping. Right before their eyes they watched as Maelstrom gradually grew slower, as he staggered back from more and more hits. Things looked bleak, and Aqualad, injured as he was, began to rally the team for an intervention. Then, it was over in a flash. If what I've experienced with this guy holds true, then I definitely want to avoid any fights with Superman. Maelstrom thought with a grimace as he twisted past what would have been a nasty haymaker while unleashing a trio of chakra arms that hammered away at his foe's guard to little effect. None of his conventional attacks had any effects on him, and the Rasengan took too much time to truly deal damage. Which was why he had gone for the more unconventional methods. It was unlikely that anyone would ever have been able to replicate what he had done, as it required the use of shadow clones and the shared vision of the rinnegan, two tools he currently had exclusive access to, as well as incredible foresight and an astonishing ability to multitask. Wonder what Iruka-sensei would think about his old, dead last student pulling something like this. The man would likely be absolutely gobsmacked because, where anyone on the ground would see an islet littered with trenches and craters, a person with a bird's eye view would see an intricately constructed, triple-layered seal. And it was finally time to light things up. He had been leading Black Adam on for the past few minutes, gradually dropping his speed, leaving more and more holes in his guard and seemingly becoming sloppy. Arrogant warrior that he was, Teth Adam had swiftly capitalized on the perceived weaknesses, not even bothering to consider the possibility that he might have been baited as he struck out hard and fast at the shinobi. A nasty kick sent Maelstrom flying to the edge of the islet, his cloak sputtering as he struggled to his knees. "You, boy, are nothing more than a mortal playing at being a god." Black Adam scowled as he hung in the air, watching his foe's defeated slump. "Know your place." I do," Maelstrom sighed tiredly, raising his hands in surrender. "Whatever you do, just let the others go." Upon hearing the quietly spoken plea, the god king of Kondak finally descended to the ground. The very same instant Maelstrom's blazing fists struck the edge of a trench. Fuinjustu Ogi. Rikujakoro. A blinding flash of light burst from the seal as the matrix was fully charged with chakra, his clones hidden in the ground having supplied most of the chakra required. When the flash dimmed and the spots cleared out of people's eyes, each and every person watching the fight went slack-jawed, from the team to the conscious members of the Injustice Society. Black Adam was prone on the ground, a thin line of blood seeping out of his nostrils to splash onto the blackened earth. Maelstrom, now without the cloak, staggered over to the downed villain and slapped a stasis seal between his shoulders before rolling him over and slapping a second tag on his forehead before collapsing in feigned exhaustion, prompting his friends to race toward him, Artemis and Raven bringing up the rear with the Injustice Society held in a dark purple magical construct. "Maelstrom, dude, are you alright?" Kid Flash asked as he skidded to a stop beside the shinobi, a bit uncertain what to do next. "Fine, KF, just peachy," he groaned as he pushed himself to a sitting position as the rest of the team arrived. "Don't worry, I'm just a bit drained from pushing myself too hard." "Okay. Good, that's good to know." The speedster sighed before turning a glare on the blonde. "Now, if you don't mind asking, what the hell was that ow?" Ignoring how he put it, "I think we all want to know how you took Black Adam out," Aqualad affirmed, tuning out Kid Flash's irate whines. I think we'd be better off regrouping in the bioship first. Shard interjected smoothly as she helped Aqualad lift Maelstrom to his feet. Like it or not, most of us were battered pretty badly, and standing out in the open right now were little more than sitting. Get down! The dual shouts of warning from Maelstrom and Troya caught the rest of the team off guard, and the shinobi had to throw himself to the ground, taking Shard and Aqualad with him mere milliseconds before an arrow zipped over their heads and exploded against Superboy, who was just a tad too slow to react to the warning. What the hell, that was Artemis' arrow? Maelstrom whispered to the two by his side. That's the least we have to worry about, Shard warned, having activated her Byakugan the instant Maelstrom pulled her down. Raven, Miss Martian, Kid Flash and Robin are all displaying erratic behavior, they seem. Tula, Aqualad's scream caught them off guard, and they were left in a daze as the Atlantean ran off in a random direction before diving as though to catch someone. Oh no, 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 Tula. Maelstrom, what's going on? Troya shouted as she dodged a furious assault from a clearly enraged yet teary-eyed Artemis. Why the hell is Artemis calling me Sportsmaster? They're hallucinating, Shard replied, rolling away as a pair of water whips slammed into the spot she had just vacated. Either something got into them or… The scarecrow gas, Maelstrom supplied as he grabbed a now enraged Superboy's fist and judo tossed the boy away. It must be in the air. But why aren't we affected? Physiology. Shard answered as she took note of the growing instability in Raven's energy reserves. Maelstrom, Raven's growing unstable. Shit. Search for the Joker, he commanded even as he instantly tapped into the planet's energy to boost his sensory sphere, seeking even the slightest hint of the clown's presence. He was the only one missing before I fought Black Adam. Arg, Troya, he yelled as the Amazon smacked into a tree, having been clipped by an explosive arrow. We need to wrap this up quickly, she groaned, her voice strained as she tried to fight off the creeping shadows at the corners of her vision. A few feet away, Shard stumbled blindly for a second and got cracked across the jaw by Aqualad's hammer construct. The fear was beginning to set in. Just then, Maelstrom caught a flash of purple to his left and, vanishing in a swirl of leaves, he reappeared right above the Joker, his fist plowing into the clown's collarbone. Undo it, he growled as he stood over the crumpled heap. Give me the antidote now. Instead of cowering as one would expect, though, the Joker simply burst into insane laughter even as the team slowly descended into fear-induced madness. Beautiful, isn't it? I always wanted to see the effects of Old Crow's fear gas up close. You know, really study the effects. Anyone else should have choked Maelstrom's killing intent generated. The Joker just continued laughing, his mad cackles grating on the shinobi's nerves. Yet, the knowledge of how Black Canary, who had somehow wormed her way into his heart, felt about killing stayed his hand. As such, rather than spilling his blood, the shinobi's cold eyes warped into the red of the Sharingan before mutating further into the rippled pattern of the rinnegan. It had not taken long after gaining the sage's eyes for him to realize that Nagado's use of the paths had been dictated by his frail body and his moral leanings, particularly for what he was about to do. Nagato's Naraka path was known for its ability to extract information from any being with a touch, though the price was the unwilling informant's life. As it turned out, that price was only because the redhead had never seen any reason to keep the informants alive. Hauling the Joker to his feet with one hand, Maelstrom placed his other palm on the clown's forehead and channeled his chakra. With the rinnegan active, it was easy to understand the seemingly random burst of electricity in the Joker's brain, and he could follow each and every thread that represented a memory in the man's twisted mind, no matter how repressed. Within a second, he had pillaged the man's thoughts and come to a conclusion. A clone appeared beside him and sped off to knock the others out as he dropped the Joker on his ass. Then, before the villain could so much as blink, his head was sent flying, an arc of blood tracing its path through the air. I'm sorry, Canary, but some people aren't capable of being redeemed. He sighed as he set to work on concealing the madman's death, knowing that he had irrevocably altered his relationship with the blonde heroine and the rest of the hero community. When he returned to the clearing, he saw his clone running glowing green palms over an insensate Superboy's temples, the rest of them lying about after being knocked out by his clone and moved to rest in more comfortable positions. How are they doing? Stabilizing. The clone replied shortly. I pulled Raven, Miss M, KF and Shard out of the hallucinations and neutralized Scarecrow's toxins, though there might be some vomiting when they wake up. The shinobi nodded, walked over to Aqualad and called up his chakra to run diagnostics before proceeding on the healing. And the Injustice League? I applied the Warden tag to be safe, but Raven's spell still seems pretty strong. The clone lifted its head to stare at its creator dead on. Of course, there's one missing. You know what I saw in his head, he replied quietly. You know there's only one possibility. Just making sure. 10 minutes later, the team was resting in blissfully dreamless slumber and the clone dispelled itself. Not even 10 seconds later, Maelstrom received an update from Kakashi that had him swearing under his breath. Nirvana had been activated and the ancient artifact had risen to the surface of the ocean. Jinx had just triggered what she referred to as the initial stage, Kakashi reported, when an older guy, younger girl duo simply showed up, sending things spiraling. Kakashi still doesn't know what that thing does, and, with this new duo factored in, things just got more complicated. He thought with narrowed eyes, and with the team out. Right then, like an answer to his inner dilemma, Aqualad, Superboy and Troya all stirred and began to rise, even as Wonder Woman, Superman and a number of other leaguers descended from the sky. They were just landing when Maelstrom strode up to them, going straight for Canary and Batman, both of whom had been carried by Green Lantern. "Something's come up and I've got to go deal with it," he stated, earning a slight frown from Black Canary. "Something also cropped up on our end," she replied. "What's yours?" "An informant just told me about the discovery of an ancient artifact." He didn't miss the slight glance the two exchanged, but he continued nonetheless. "It's a bit light to go on, but it ties into a group I've been tracking, so it's worth a look into." "This artifact, is it by any chance a floating island?" When the shinobi nodded, Batman continued, "We have a man on ground, John Constantine. He's there with a partner and he swears that we had to destroy the thing." "In that case, I'll head out now. I'll call Flash." Maelstrom shook his head. "The team needs you guys now. They were exposed to the Cobra Venom enhanced fear gas," he explained as he called upon the chakra cloak. "I'll get there on my own." And with that, he disappeared in a golden flash, 2 hours ago. Zatanna's scowl as she parted a curtain of damp seaweed was the stuff of legends. "You know, when you told me about this whole, inspect the land, clear out any possible dangerous things strewn about recklessly, thing, you could at least have tossed in the promise of a new spell. It would have helped alleviate some of the rage simmering inside me right now." "Are you angry at me, love? Or at the sheer amount of mucky filth we've had to wade through?" Constantine shot back, recovering from a near fall due to the slimy film of wetness that seemed to pervade the entire structure. "At this point, I'm tilting toward the first option, eek." The scream ripped its way out of her throat as a round, fanged thing lunged for her face only to get punted back by John's fist. "What the fuck was that?" "Language, love," John chided, placing a hand on her shoulder to guide her deeper into the labyrinthine structure. "Bad enough that I stole you away. You returned to Papa swearing like a vexed sailor, and I'll have honorary uncle rights revoked permanently." It was a joke and she knew it. No matter how many times her father revoked his rights, it took a few minutes of her working him over to have them re-invoked. But the comment, and the easy way he said it, went a long way in calming her nerves. "Har to har, Uncle John, real hilarious," she panted as her rapidly beating heart finally returned to more normal ranges. "Seriously, though, what was that?" "That, I believe, was a viperfish. Nasty little bugger. Lives at some ungodly depths where the dark is all there is and the pressure'll turn your insides out." He smirked at her. "Fun place, I'll be sure to send you my invite." She fired back. "Give me a moment, please." "Take your time, darling. Other than raising this ungodly piece of work from the depths, our incredibly moronic hosts don't seem to know what to do with it." She was all too glad to take him up on the offer, finding a spot to catch her breath. For what felt like the umpteenth time, her eyes were drawn to the haunting artistry of the structure. Interlocking stone paths that seemed to have suffered no more damage than a sheen of moss, stone walls carved with mosaics that, even after an untold period of time in the depths of the oceans, remained eerily lifelike. As she followed the mosaics, she could almost imagine a bustling community within these walls, living their lives much like she did when she wasn't cooped up in the house. It was beautiful, until the images became cruel. "What the hell is this, Uncle John?" she gasped, jerking her eyes away from the mosaics further away from her. The pounding pulse, the elevated heart rate, it was all back as she tried to forget what she had just seen. From images of families having fun on picnics to people savagely whipping the flesh off the bones of their brethren. Mobs devolving into cannibalistic savagery. Children, babies, being dashed against rocks, and through it all, the perpetrators maintained grins of maddened satisfaction. "This, love, is the legacy of the bloody fools who thought they could bring down gods," Constantine replied, and though his voice maintained its cool, had she been watching closely, she would have seen the tremors in his hands as he lit a cigarette. "You're standing in the greatest achievement and the ultimate doom of the Nervit. The Nervit, the very first civilization on Earth and, save maybe today's civilization, the most advanced." John took a long drag on the cig, feeling the nicotine slowly shoot through his system and returning a bit of balance to him. The Nervit were, to the ancient world, what we are to the ancient Egyptians. While everyone else, even the early Atlanteans, squabbled for territory and food and whatnot, they were building monuments that'd make the Sphinx look like a toddler's plaything. While the rest of the world suffered outbreaks of diseases and the like, they had cracked the genetic code and produced the first metahumans. You know, people with superhuman abilities. And while the rest of the world were just learning to harness fire with equal parts fear and awe, they wielded magic. Zatanna exhaled. Sounds like they were glorious. And, much like every civilization that's ever hit the glorious stage, they were bloody fools. He knocked some ash off the butt of his cigarette. They reached the peak of everything they set their minds to, and when looking down on the rest of the world wasn't enough, they turned their eyes up. It didn't take a genius to figure out what he meant, yet Zatanna found herself gasping all the same, knowing that it wouldn't end well. They wanted to tear down the system, so to speak, and they knew that to do so, they had to take down who they thought of as the gods, bunch of morons. What happened? What happened? Well, the Nervate created this structure that we're standing on. Nirvana, they called it. A device that would turn light to darkness. The cancer stick was all burned out now, and he let it drop to the ground. Their plan was simple. Draw the gods in with desperate cries, activate Nirvana, and turn said divine ones against themselves. Not a bad plan, I say. As much as she knew that it was a stupid act committed by an arrogant race that had tried to destroy the delicate hierarchy order existed in, she couldn't help but agree with John. Having their vastly superior enemies turn on each other was a simple but effective way of winning a battle like that. So how did it all go so wrong? John guessed, by how quietly she had uttered the question, that she hadn't meant to even ask, but he willingly answered. The mistake they made was simple. They didn't know who they were up against. Sure, they got the goons the Lords of Order sent to them as proxies. Hell, I think 1 or 2 lords might have chipped a nail dealing with their cronies, but other than that? Not a problem for the big guys. Unfortunately for the Nervate, the lords wanted to know what the hell was going on down here, and so they waltzed over. He sighed, knowing he had finally gotten to the really messed up part of the tale. Imagine their shock when they arrived to meet all that. His jaw jutted toward the farther mosaics, the more demented ones. Between the proxy's departure and the arrival of the lords, nearly 3 years passed. More than enough time for one of the masters of chaos to spot the Nervate and corrupt their biggest monument. Nirvana was meant to flip a person's moral compass. A good person would become bad, vice versa, by tapping into the darkness in everyone's hearts and enhancing it. The Nervate thought they were warded against its effects, but their magic was no match for a master of chaos, and, for people who were arrogant enough to think of challenging their gods, the darkness within them was, well, suffice it to say that by the time the lords came around, wiping out the Nervate was a mercy. And they left this here as, what? A monument? A warning to the few stragglers that lived beyond this chunk of rock. Don't fuck with the powers that be. He replied with a shrug. Come on, break time's over. What happened to the stragglers? A few of them went out into the world and used their abilities to pose as deities and such. Most of their magicals, though. Constantine turned to her with a serious expression. They gathered together, formed a secret community who swore to snuff their very own history. They're the reason this big old thing had to be dug up. When they saw that they couldn't destroy it, they chose to sink it. Zatanna crossed her arms and stared at him. You sound very knowledgeable about a history that should have been snuffed, Uncle John. How do you even know about this ages-old secret community? He glanced at the young girl. I've got my ways around Z, you know that. As for the community, well, I thought you'd have figured it out, smart girl that you are. I don't get it, she stated bluntly. Well, the secret community is one you should know very well, after all, you're a descendant. Zatanna's the realization crashed into her. The stragglers, they were the first Homo Magi. He nodded while silently casting a spell to ascertain that they were on the right track. As it is, we need to get to the center of this old mess. That's where the corrupted power source is, and that I'm willing to bet here is where whoever raised this abomination is headed. Corrupted, wait. She froze as something struck her. If the power source for this thing is the source of the corruption and this platform has been activated, then doesn't that mean that we should be feeling the effects of the corruption now? While you're not necessarily wrong there, love, you forgot to factor one thing in. The passage of time. John replied as they turned a corner and walked into a large, open space interspersed with cracked and chipped statues. Time's like a river and everything else is like a pebble on the banks. Doesn't matter how tough it might seem, it'll get worn over in the end. That's an awfully philosophical line of thought, Uncle John. You haven't been sneaking a drink in while I wasn't looking, have you? Zatanna asked with a weak grin in a bid to get her mind off the gloomy path they were headed toward. Considering what I've come to know about him, that wouldn't be much of a surprise now, would it, miss? Rather than jump at the unexpected voice, she stood her ground, readying a defensive spell as her eyes flitted about to try to locate the source of the voice, and so, with a quick muttering of Nefed ts Niaga Lla Lufemra sk Kata, she easily took care of the trio of bladed projectiles that flew at them. Constantine launched an offensive counter-strike with a magical fireball impacting off the statue closest to the source of the projectiles a second later. Keep the shield up, Z. I think we've found our grave robbers. Now that's just rude. The voice echoed around them as another salvo of knives ricocheted off the barrier spell, forcing them to keep an eye on every possible angle. What's to say we aren't archaeologists? The lack of bloody tools is a pointer. Ephrir dig Katz ar Thum. A hail of ice needles erupted from the outer edges of the invisible barrier Zatanna had created and shot off into the darkness, each magical projectile seeking the source of the initial attack. Unfortunately, their target was an extremely elusive one with a penchant for complex, layered plans. Seconds after the ice needles had gone hunting, the ground in front of the two magic users shattered as a giant, hairy man-thing literally exploded out and began to lay into the barrier with terrifying force. Within moments, Zatanna was on her knees, blood beginning to drip out of her nose as the strain of maintaining the barrier swiftly grew to dangerous levels. Constantine, realizing that they had been played, grabbed his charge by the arm and cast a localized transposition spell that got them out of immediate danger. Knowing that they weren't out of the woods just yet, he swiftly summoned an orb of glowing magical energy before chucking it at the nearest statue. Within seconds, the ancient sculpture gained full mobility, hefting the spear that it had formerly leaned upon with a sure grip. Durgar Bastina's Talhoneth, Constantine yelled, some a protective barrier of his own that sprang up just in time to deflect another fireball. Knowing that their enemies could turn the shield against them, the warlock quickly summoned up a smokescreen that, combined with the animated statue's defense, allowed John and Zatanna to slip away undetected. Currently, Cadmus facility, damn it, Terra swore as she studied the readouts on the tablet in her hand, hoping she was just seeing things. 7 blips at the beginning of the mission, only 6 at the end. Someone had died out in that swamp. She glanced at the grayed out name and swore again before whirling on the nearest technician. You're certain this couldn't have been as a result of a glitch or something? 100%, ma'am. She let go of the technician. When did she even grab him? And hurled the tab against the wall before striding toward the director's office. This changed everything. Until this moment, the heroes had been predictable, sure to follow certain paths like mules with blinkers on. If this was held true, if it was an indication of something. Look, oh you. The warning came far too late for her to avoid the patch of slimy blue liquid on the ground, and, were it not for a familiar face, she'd have landed on the ground. And that's why we watch where we're going. Kennedy smirked at her before noting the look on her face. Tara, what is it? For a second, she debated the pros and cons of telling him before deciding to do it anyway. The Joker's dead. The brunette froze for a second before standing her on her feet and staring right into her eyes. What? Remember how I told you that the members of the Injustice League had ingested active nanites that allowed us to track them? He nodded. Well, the nanites were more than just trackers. They allowed us to monitor their vitals, pulse, neural activity, the whole 9 yards. And the Joker's readout just flatlined. Kennedy had a fairly decent guess whom the culprit was. Have you confirmed that this isn't an error of some sort? He returned her answering glare with a cool but firm stare. I don't for 1 second doubt your competence, Tara, but when things like this happen we need to start from the ground up. Now I'll ask again, are we certain that this isn't error? It isn't, she spat, still incensed at the question, though she understood why he had asked. I ran what tests I could on my own and then frog marched the text through all the comprehensive tests. Nothing. We also confirmed that it wasn't an internal error from the nanites themselves. They're still broadcasting but the data we're receiving. Says, good night Joker. The head of security pinched his nose absently as he thought of his next move. He knew that the chances were all too high that the boss had finally offed the psychopathic clown, but the question was whether to divert the Cadmus group from the Joker's death or to let it roll a bit further and see where things were headed. We're certain that the signal's not been hijacked. This is the Joker we're talking about. No one has a clue how his mind works. He may have somehow figured out a way to interfere with the signal and overlap it with one of his own. They didn't even know that they were carrying the nanites, she hissed. Each member was tagged in a different way to ensure that none of them would so much as think they were being tracked. He held up his hands in a placating gesture. Just plain devil's advocate, but that's done now. He added as he came to a decision, if you don't mind, I'd like to sit in on your discussion with the director. If this marks the beginning of a new mentality from the heroes, then we need to have a game plan ready. Let's go. Bayou Bartholomew Black Canary frowned as the flash from Maelstrom's departure faded, trying to figure out what was wrong. Something about the way the bodyguard had acted drew her attention. The minute way he seemed to distance himself from her, the way he avoided her eyes. Naruto, what is going on? Something wrong? Batman asked. The heroine hesitated for a few moments, wondering whether or not to share her thoughts with the Dark Knight. Ultimately, she opted not to, hoping against hope that her as yet unsubstantiated thoughts would not come to fruition. Just a passing thought. We need to check in on the team. The Bat decided to shelve her reaction, for now. Green Lantern has been running diagnostics on them. They're recovering from varying levels of exposure to the fear gas. How bad? She asked as they began walking toward the rest of the League. We'll know when we get there. And the Injustice League? Superman and Wonder Woman are checking on them now. He replied as they walked up to Green Lantern as he was rounding up the checkup on Shirtus. I'm fine now. She groaned as she sat up, holding a hand to her head as the rest of the team gathered round. What happened? You were all exposed to Scarecrow's fear gas, triggering different reactions in each of you. From what I could pick up, Raven nearly lost control, Artemis, Superboy and Aqualad attacked anyone in sight while yourself, Robin, Miss Martian and Kid Flash were nearly catatonic. Green Lantern reported. You're in the clear now, though, except for maybe a headache or two. We appreciate the help, Green Lantern, the intergalactic enforcer, shook his head. I didn't do it though. When he saw the looks of confusion on their faces, Canary and Batman included, he explained. While I did meet most of you unconscious, you must understand that I only ran diagnostics, which provided the information I just shared. Maelstrom. Raven murmured, drawing the attention of everyone within earshot. He told me a while back that he could delve into people's minds to break them out of things like mental possession. That's how he saved you? Batman asked, the question directed at Shard, who simply nodded. Then he must have done something similar here. Shard agreed. So where is he? He's supporting an associate on a new situation that just came up. Batman answered before turning to the rest of the team. Aqualad, Troya, Miss Martian, Superboy, can you still fight? Aqualad, guessing where this was going, glanced at the aforementioned team members, and, receiving nods from each, responded with a firm assent. Good. Get the bioship and head out. Cyborg will transmit the coordinates to you once you're buckled in. Batman ordered as Superman and Wonder Woman joined them. The rest of you. We have a problem. Superman interrupted, his jaw set in a manner the Bat had come to recognize as portraying worry. The Joker's missing. The statement brought everyone's guard up, especially Canary, who could somehow sense that this was the source of the underlying tension she had felt from Maelstrom earlier. Within the time it took him to call upon his chakra cloak, Naruto had already locked on to Kakashi's chakra signature and, by the time he was airborne, he was angled directly toward his spy's coordinates. Now, as hundreds of miles flashed by in milliseconds, his mind was fully engaged with the thoughts from his clones. Michael was indeed busy with Pamela, but he got off a few clones and was able to help direct the evacuation of most of the residents. Shaved off about 15% from the projected casualty estimates. That's good. How about Chloe? Any news? She couldn't get out as easily as Michael, but when the opportunity arose she had suction seals set up to siphon away the airborne dangers. We've got more samples of the fear gas and the Joker venom than we know what to do with. Keep them in storage for now. Pamela seems to be tilting more to our side now, so we might have a use for them yet. Anything else? Nothing we shouldn't be able to deal with. Good. Check in on Kagaya and give me a status report, and have Michael keep a close eye on Pamela. He shouldn't reactivate the seal. No, and as much as possible he should keep a bit of distance between them. I want to know if she's truly had a change of heart or if we need to cut our losses. I'll relay the message. And have Shikamaru compile the intel we have. If he's right and this injustice thing is just a front, then we're going to have to step things up a bit so we don't fall behind. With the Joker dead, our time with the team is numbered, and the Batman strikes me as the vindictive type. You think we'll have to go it alone? It's the most likely option, and we have been preparing for such an eventuality. He added as he approached the circular platform Kakashi's signature was beaming from. Altering his angle of approach, he dropped from the sky in a flash to hover a few feet above the water. I found the Nirvana platform, going dark, now. With that, the mental connection was terminated even as the cloak receded, leaving him to sprint the final few miles to the platform over the water. His eyes raked over the titanic structure as he moved, searching for an entry point. From his point of view, he could see that the platform had 3 tiers, each at least 150 feet tall, with 3 yawning hollow caves set into it at equally spaced intervals along its sides. Between those huge hollows were smaller arches from which water gushed out in gallons. I might be wrong, but I'd still hazard a guess that the caves must contain something huge and probably integral to the overall structure. There's no water rushing out of them because whatever's inside is probably a snug fit for the caves. The arches, on the other hand, he narrowed his eyes and leapt, twisting his body so that his feet would strike the nearest waterfall, having gotten within reach of the platform. It was easy as breathing for him to adjust the flow of chakra to his feet as he raced up the waterfall, neither the fine spray of water nor its deafening roar posing even the most minute of distractions. Kakashi hadn't spoken of traps during his reports, but then, his spy had been led onto the platform by someone who likely knew a bit about the place. He needed to keep his wits about him. You need to take this seriously, Jade. I will not always be there when you need me. Jade, for the very first time in quite a while, felt herself actively missing her uncle. It was a bit odd, really. The man had become a second father in her eyes before his untimely demise, and she felt the loss deeply each and every day, but, for the first time in more than 6 years, she felt a deep-seated pang in the core of her being at his absence. If anything, I probably wouldn't have gotten myself in this mess if he was here, she thought with a dark scowl as she stumbled for a moment before getting her feet back under her. The tips of her ears blazed, the only visible sign of her rising anger, as she heard 2 of her 3 captors laughing at her struggles. She kept her shoulders up even as she trudged through the dank interior of the very artifact she had helped uncover, knowing in a corner of her mind that this outcome was pretty much her own fault. She should have vetted the purple-streaked bitch when she turned up with the whole "nerve it" business. She should have run background checks to ensure that the girl's story checked out. She should have pumped her for information on how such a high-class girl could have known about raiders. Jade sighed as she took a right turn. Her path mapped out thanks to Rubal's residual soul shard. I got greedy. and now I'm about to pay for that. Hey Jinx, you sure this is the right way to go? The lanky teen beside her asked, his high-pitched, nasally tone grating on her already frayed nerves. I mean, she seems like the type to take us on a wild goose out of sheer spite. What, and give you a reason to try out those nasty-looking machines? She didn't sound like she was in a bothersome situation. If anything, her tone was light and conversational. After all, there was no point in needlessly antagonizing her captors. She's leading us in the right direction, Jinx stated decisively, cutting Gizmo off before he could reply. The path isn't direct by any means, but we're headed right toward the center of this thing. Which brings up the question. What exactly do you guys want here? I mean, this thing was at the bottom of the ocean when the Egyptians got their first pharaoh. It's so fucking old no one remembers it but you guys. So, why? You'll know when we get there. Jade visibly rolled her eyes upon hearing that answer but refrained from further comments. The curt response had been helpful in its own way. It confirmed her suspicions that these guys had a clear-cut goal. That made them even more dangerous. As soon as they were done with her, she was almost certainly going to be terminate. A light shudder rippled through the structure, dislodging loose clumps of dirt to glance around. Nothing seemed out of place. Maybe Kakashi's run into trouble, Stacy suggested as they moved on, their senses at high alert. Maybe, Jinx said, her pale face scrunched up in a frown. Unlike the others, her senses extended beyond the typical human range, so she had picked up on the surge of magical energy that had accompanied the sudden shudder of the Nirvana structure. She was still pondering over the nature of that energy when the very air around her seemed to screech violently, scatter. Gizmo and Stacy, who knew of their leader's precognitive abilities, instantly dived apart, the Amazon clone grabbing their captive as she went. They were still mid-air when they were blown back by a concussive blast of force as something landed where they had just vacated. Jade was the first to recover, her fall having been cushioned by Stacy, so she was the first to set eyes upon it. It was an 8-foot-tall, slate-gray statue, one of the many that they had seen nestled in various alcoves throughout the structure. It held only a staff that was inches shorter than itself, but it swung that weapon around so smoothly that one would have been forgiven for seeing it as a huge man rather than a creation of earth and magic. A thin, high-pitched tune filled the air as 3 more statues dropped to the ground, each armed as the first. "Hey treasure girl. Thought you said this place was dead," Gizmo yelled as he pulled out his laser blasters, warily eyeing the silent guardians as 2 of his defense builds floated out of his backpack to hover his shoulders. The duo Kakashi and Mammoth had been fighting or tossing around a decent amount of magical energy. Jinx answered as she drew upon the ambient energies and summoned a pair of emerald flame orbs to hover around her. "I think they've crossed a threshold of some sort and, whatever these are, make up a defense system to secure this platform." Though she stood in their midst, to Jade, the words of her captors seemed to be coming from a great distance as a library of knowledge seemed to bloom inside her mind. All of a sudden, the nature of Nirvana's many defenses became clear to her even as she realized that she could now understand the nature of the humming tune the statues seemed to produce. It was one half of a harmonic resonance that, if matched by its counterpart, would identify them as allies of the Nervate and would have the stony guardians grant them passage onwards. That was why the statues hadn't attacked yet, they were waiting for the pass tune. And, thanks to Rubal's residual soul shard that was now taking an active role within her, she knew exactly what it was. "What is she? Let her be," Jinx commanded sharply, cutting Gizmo off before he could think of moving. Her eyes were narrowed, observing the relic hunter as she approached the statues as though she was in a trance. "Stacy, if one of those things moves aggressively, get our crazy tour guide out of there, got it?" To Jade, their words seemed to echo from a distant land. Her world was completely immersed in the tune and how to complete it. Standing right before the lead statue, she bent, picked up a loose rock and methodically tapped out a tune on the statue's breastplate. Nothing happened for the first few seconds. Then the humming stopped and all 4 statues simply stood aside, granting them access to the hallway beyond. "Huh. Guess Treasure Girl's got some worth," Gizmo commented as he slowly sheathed his blasters, the defense builds still circling him protectively. "I wonder where she's going now," Stacy mused as she jotted over to keep pace with the still entranced Jade. "She'll lead us where we need to get to," Jinx stated decisively. None of them noticed the dark figure watching them from the tier above. The bioship raced through the air, distorting the clouds in its path as Megan pushed it to go as fast as it reasonably could. Inside, the 4 members of the team were discussing their course of action upon arrival at the target site. Well, 3 of the 4 were participating in that discussion. "Megan, you are yet to say a word regarding our discussion," Calder pointed out, drawing attention to their silent pilot. "Is something wrong?" The Martian wanted to allay the concern she could see in her friend's eyes, especially Connor's, but she was so torn up on the issue that she couldn't force herself to lie. I think Maelstrom's in trouble." No one said a word as they all tried to figure out what she meant by that. Each of them knocked off the possibility that it had something to do with the mission they were currently on. After all, A threat powerful enough to have the shinobi in trouble would have warranted the attention of the league, wouldn't it? No, it had to do with the man himself. You found something about his past? Donna asked, knowing that the blonde's past was something her sister was very interested in knowing of. Megan, however, shook her head. When I woke up earlier, after the fear gas thing, my mind kind of touched everyone else's. The few of us that were already awake were confused and jumbled, but Canary, Superman and Wonder Woman were particularly clear. And they all involved Maelstrom in some way. What were they thinking of? Calder prompted. Superman was incensed. Like he was upset at something Naruto did. Canary was really worried about him, like she was afraid he had done something he shouldn't have. And Wonder Woman? Donna prompted. She was the murkiest of the three. It was like she was upset yet not upset. Megan sighed. I've been thinking of all the possible reasons for their thoughts and, well, I don't like anything I thought of. You think he might have killed the Joker? Calder asked quietly, though he had a sinking feeling that his guess was right. No way. The response was sharp, instinctual and right on the tip of Connor's tongue. Yet, he couldn't utter it. He knew precisely why his mind had almost instantly rejected the notion. Accepting that the blonde, who had spent so much time helping him come to terms with himself, had killed the Joker meant that he would have to accept the ramifications of such a decision. Though he couldn't know it, Connor's thoughts mirrored those of his teammates. We're coming up on the target, Megan stated, returning her focus to the task at hand, and all present on the ship felt a wave of gratitude that they wouldn't have to continue that discussion. Visuals coming up. The bioship's flight path shifted as she angled them down to cut through the clouds, cloaking the ship as they approached their destination. Well, damn, Connor breathed when they finally saw their target. That's big. Sensors say it covers about 50,000 square meters. Megan reported as the ship created holographic displays for the rest of the team. The platform's heading toward the coast of North Carolina. Current speeds clocked in at 20 knots. Can we get a map of the insides? Donna asked as she rotated the rendered model around, wondering what the huge hollows on the sides were for. Maybe infrared too, so we get a rough idea of what we're heading into. Megan didn't respond at first, only to jerk back abruptly, the ship shuddering for a few moments before leveling out again. I take it we can't get a look into it? Calder prompted, though his concern for his teammate showed in his tone. It's lined with something that just repelled every sensor we have on board, she replied. Calder, take the controls. I want to see if I can't get in telepathically. The control orbs under her hands sank into the floor of the ship even as another set came up beneath the Atlantean. Then, she focused on the platform beneath them and sent out a mental probe. When it didn't come bouncing back at her head, she took it as a positive sign and swiftly sent her mind soaring into the platform. 5 minutes later, her eyes snapped open, faint green glows dimming until they returned to her normal brown shade. I got a lock on Maelstrom. He's USPECTS to be behind this thing. And the Batman's associate? Calder asked. I think I found him. John Constantine is currently engaged in a running fight against Mammoth and an unidentified person. Maelstrom hasn't met him yet though. Alright then, we'll meet up with Constantine, see what he knows and then link up with Maelstrom. Calder decided. Any objections? When no one raised any objections, he continued. Megan, move us in and have Bioship track our location as we move. We need to be prepared for a swift departure. Maelstrom watched with narrowed eyes as the girl Kakashi had identified as Jade led her captors through the labyrinthine bowels of the structure. From the moment those statues had begun emitting that strange humming tone, the girl had slipped into what seemed to be a fugue state, completely ignoring the words of her captors as she marched along. And what words? While the girl with the pink streaked hair remained relatively mum, the other two, particularly the lanky boy, seemed to have difficulties keeping their mouths shut. He didn't mind though. Their flapping gums had provided a wealth of information for him about a number of things. Maelstrom, we've arrived. What now? Good job, Aqualad. Rendezvous with Batman's contacts but send Superboy and Troya over. Maelstrom replied, ducking behind a half-crumpled pillar as his targets stopped before a huge, gated archway. I'll have a clone meet them and guide them here while a second joins you. Understood. Good luck. With the message passed, he returned his attention to the quartet below, who had arrived at the entrance to a room that his internal radar told him was at the center of the structure. Then, Jade turned to her captors and leveled a truly intimidating glare at them. To this point, I have led you without a word, knowing that, in this body I stand no chance of subduing you, no more. The spirit that spoke through her paused, its judgmental glare intensifying as it locked onto Gizmo's hand that strayed a tad too close to his blaster. When Jinx grabbed hold of the boy's arm and frowned, getting him to stop, the possessed girl nodded. Behind these doors lie the powers that my people sought to wield to bring down the gods. If nothing else, the desolation of this structure and the absence of my people's name from your historical records should tell you our fate. The glare softened and the young woman's features morphed into such an image of weary sorrow that there could be no doubt that she was possessed. No human alive could express such pain as what they had seen, a pain born of millennia-old regrets. The possessed girl turned to the door and placed a palm on the smooth, stone surface. I am Rubol, the last of the Nervit, and this is my final warning to you. The legacy of the Nervit is nothing but pain and destruction. This will be no different. With its peace, said the ancient spirit, appearing as a gray mist, detached itself from its host and sank into the door, its phantasmal energy powering the door's mechanism. Damn it, Jinx swore as his jade slumped. I'd have preferred it if the old spirit stuck around long enough to be of some use in here. Now when have things ever been easy for us? Gizmo scoffed as he kicked at Jade's limp arm. What do we do with her? Leave her. The black and pink-haired girl stated. With Rubal's spirit gone, it's unlikely that she'll be of any use to us going further. Besides, judging by how shallow her breathing is, she won't be getting up anytime soon. The possession drained a large chunk of her life force. Once more unto the breach, then. Stacy cracked her knuckles as she followed Jinx through the door, Gizmo right behind her. A few seconds later, Naruto, rendered invisible by Jiraiya's patented technique, went through, having left a clone to get Jade to a safer location. Once again, he was struck by the sheer genius of the ancient Nervit. It wasn't the size of the room that caught his attention, though he estimated the circular room to be about 500 meters across and about half that in height. It wasn't the level of detail in the mosaics that adorned those walls, though a large swath had been marred by the same obscene art that had corrupted the outer walls. No, his attention, and that of the three he was stalking, was drawn to the hovering ball of iridescent energy that dominated the center of the room, its surface seeming to pulse at random intervals. It's the power source of this thing. Gizmo murmured, sounding awestruck as prismatic lights played across his face. It's the power source, but there are no connections. No wires or conduits. This makes no sense. Stop! Jinx's harsh command sliced through the haze that had subtly clogged his mind, startling him back to awareness. Behind them, Maelstrom gave the streaked girl an appraising glance. He had detected the subtly seductive aura that the energy orb gave off and was able to ignore it quite easily, a feat he hadn't expected any of them to accomplish. If there was ever any doubt in his mind that this orb had led to the downfall of the ancient people that lived here, it was dead and buried. What The Amazonian clone shook her head with a grunt, trying to clear up any leftover cobwebs. What was that? That thing is more than an energy source. It's tied to whatever that spirit warned us about. Jade answered firmly as she reached into her backpack and pulled out a grenade-sized orb. The legacy of the Nervit. Nirvana, whatever you want to call it, that thing's tied to why they don't show up in most historical records. Which makes me wonder why you still want to steal it. The three teen villains spun on their heels, Jinx and Gizmo bringing their respective weapons to bear. Only to collapse like puppets whose strings had been snipped courtesy of a mildly powerful illusion. Genjutsu rocks. Maelstrom smirked as he walked past their limp bodies, leaving a clone to incarcerate them while he stared at the luminous energy orb. Now, to figure out how to lock you up. Abruptly, his instincts blared a warning and he reacted instantly, narrowly dodging a savage crosscut kick that seemingly came out of nowhere. He was on the back foot, though, a fact that his unknown assailant capitalized on to lash out with a series of flowing kicks that he only just managed to dodge until he found himself facing the wall. Gotcha! The triumphant cry came a split second before an earth-shattering axe kick slammed into his skull and drove him into the ground. His broken form wavered for an instant before vanishing, replaced by shattered bits of fresco. Ah, the little Amazon clone, his voice reverberated around the huge chamber. How did you get out of my little illusion so quickly, I wonder? Wouldn't you like to know? She shot back with a sneer as she tried to get a lock on his location to no avail. Why She was forced to cut off her question when, in a sudden flurry of motion, she found herself on the back foot, working herself to the bone to avoid or parry the series of blows that came at her. She could tell, not just from the look in her enemy's eyes but from the sheer crippling force she could feel behind his blows, that he was deathly serious and that the slightest slip-up would spell her doom. She did her damned best to stay ahead of him, to prevent that slip-up, but, in the end, it was inevitable. After blocking a trio of punches that left her forearm feeling numb, she was forced to lift her right knee to block his own knee strike. That was her mistake. Faster than she could react, Maelstrom dropped to the ground and swept her remaining foot before spinning around and after channeling a bit of chakra for added oomph, driving his right foot into her abdomen. The power behind the blow was so much that the clone was sent hurtling into the wall before dropping to her knees, vision swimming as she hacked up globs of blood. Damned bastards and their psychic enhancements. Maelstrom grunted as he stalked up to her and sent a jolt of lightning rendering her unconscious. He had been running ideas through his mind and it was the only logical explanation for her seemingly enhanced resistance to his illusion technique. Cadmus Sumdak, as they were referred to back then, must have boosted her resistance to all forms of mental manipulation. With her taken care of, he turned back to the iridescent orb and, noting that the pulse pattern had quickened, created a clone and summoned his sealing equipment. Get to work on the external containment fields, he ordered as he tossed a blank scroll at the clone. Triple-layer fortress seals with cyclic redundancy matrices in the outer layers. The clone wasn't surprised by the degree of security the boss wanted for this seal. You feel it too, huh? Something about that accelerated strobing gives me the creeps. The two fell silent as they began their work, keeping their senses open as they moved through matrix after matrix, the seal slowly taking shape on the large, 2x1 foot scroll they were using. Midway through the work, Maelstrom felt the subtle prod at his mental barriers that he had come to associate with Miss Martian's psychic knock. Pausing mid-stroke, he led her into his mind. Miss Martian. Maelstrom. Aqualad and I have taken out Mammoth and his associate, she reported concisely. He couldn't hide the tiny smile that pulled at his lips. The fact that his mind wasn't assaulted by a number of other voices implied that she had taken his advice to restrict the telepathic channels to individual teams unless absolutely necessary to heart. That's good. How about Troya and Superboy? They're headed toward you with Constantine in tow. We're with his partner, Zatanna, now. Alright. I'll be expecting them. He expected the connection to end there but, upon sensing the Martian's hesitance, he asked what was wrong. Back at the bayou, did you arg? Evil had a cruel sense of timing. Though he didn't, and couldn't possibly realize it, Maelstrom's instincts were dead on. The corruption effect that the Master of Chaos had set up all those millennia ago had persevered through the ages of disuse, lurking beneath the deceptively beautiful facade the orb had taken on. More than this, though, in those eons, it had evolved. What was once a potent curse had grown, feeding upon the latent magical energies of nirvana as it gained a form of sentience and became a sort of unlife that sought nothing more than to unleash its power upon the world once more. As such, from the very second Jade had rediscovered nirvana, the corruption had been reactivated and for every being that set foot upon the platform its hunger had grown. While Troya, Superboy and Constantine headed toward the center of the platform, guided by a clone of Maelstrom's, the corruption had spread its vile presence through the platform and while Miss Martian, aided by Zatanna and Aqualad successfully captured Mammoth and his associate, the corruption had slowly analyzed all within its reach, taking particular note of the dormant telepathic web that connected the minds of some of its new inhabitants. By the time the young Martian connected her mind to Maelstrom's for that update, the corruption had all it needed to strike and so it did, like a coiled viper whose prey had wandered too close. It slammed into McGann's mind like a freight train, tearing through her mental barriers like they were naught but wet toilet paper and, upon entry, it sought to spread into every connected mind. Superman. Wonder Woman. Troya. Aqualad. Superboy. Miss Martian. Zatanna. John Constantine. Every last one of them screamed in agony as the corruption took them, twisting their minds and destroying their senses of right and wrong as it pushed through their attempts at defiance. And then, just as swiftly as it had consumed them, the corruption fled their minds, leaving them gasping and gulping huge breaths of relief. Constantine and Miss Martian were the first to understand what had happened and they burst into motion immediately. Constantine tearing through the hallways as he raced toward the epicenter of the dark magic pulse even as Miss Martian flew in an unerringly straight line toward the same location, phasing through every obstacle in her path. They arrived at the same time, Constantine screeching to a halt as the young Martian dropped out of the ceiling, both sweeping the huge room they found themselves within, absently noting the three unconscious teenagers lying around before locking onto their target. Miss Martian couldn't hold back a gasp. It was Maelstrom as she had never seen him before, curled up tightly in a fetal position, his hands over his ears as his feet jerked spasmodically. Nah, Maelstrom. Miss Martian was prevented from rushing over to her friend's side by a scowling Constantine. Don't get too close, the magic user warned as the rest of the heroes arrived. We need to be sure that's still your. It's still me. Maelstrom groaned as he sat up, his hands shifting over to massage his temples. Meg Miss M, it's still me, Naruto. The young Martian dived toward him, nearly tackling him before recalling his present state and screeching to a halt mere inches away. Right about then, Superboy and Troya raced into the room, their worry for their friends blatant on their faces. I'm fine, really, the shinobi assured them as he slowly rose to his feet with Superboy's assistance. My head's clearing up already, he added to soothe Miss Martian's worried thoughts. Do you have any idea what that was just now? Troya asked, her brow knotted in consternation. I mean, it felt like something was crawling through my mind. You felt right, Wonder Girl. Constantine stated tersely, shooting guarded glances at a still slightly pale Maelstrom. Something was crawling through your mind. The curse on Nirvana, to be precise. The what? The Nervit got themselves saddled with a powerful curse from the Master of Chaos that flips the lines between good and evil. That's not the kind of thing that fades away because of a pesky little thing like time. Constantine shook his head. No, it festered, evolved. That would explain it then. Maelstrom nodded in agreement. Whatever it was, it felt like I was experiencing the worst case of vertigo in existence. Yeah, that sounds about right, Constantine affirmed. So what do we do now? Superboy asked. We need to round those three up, Maelstrom froze as he stared at the spot he had left Donna's clone and her group. They were gone. Shit. A fist shot out and slammed into the wall, shaking loose bits of masonry. Troya, Superboy. You remember the three we faced at Cadmus? Yeah, we took down one of them up top. Superboy frowned. Mammoth. We took Mammoth down and he had an associate with him. I thought Miss Martian told you. I think I remember. Maelstrom shook his head sharply. That doesn't matter. They had someone else with them. He stared intently at Troya. It was your clone. The Amazon's lips pressed into a thin line as she clenched her jaw. What do you need? Before everything went to shits, I took them out and had them secured. As is pretty obvious, he sighed angrily. Right, you need to head out and find them. Constantine frowned as the younger heroes swiftly vacated the room. Any idea what they wanted? They wanted the core. Maelstrom sighed again as he ran his hand through his hair. I'm not sure why, but they were talking about it just before I jumped them. Anything about the who's and why's? The question received a headshake that had the Englishman cursing. I recall Miss Martian saying something about your partner, Maelstrom said. Any idea where she is? She stayed behind with the Atlantean. Constantine answered. Your green-skinned friend was with them, actually. She's telepathic. She must have sensed what happened to me and left Aqualad behind. The shinobi sighed and ran his hand through his hair, ignoring the tinny ringing inside his head. Damn it, how the hell did they get out? Maelstrom, he SN'd to see a worried Aqualad run into the room ahead of a beautiful teen. I came as soon as I could. Thanks, Aqualad. He nodded at the Atlantean and slanted a smile at the newcomer before focusing on his teammate. What about Mammoth and his partner? Zatanna helped secure them before we left. Why? I thought I had the three I met here secured until a few moments ago. He growled in annoyance. Troya, Superboy and Miss Martian are out to get them back, but… He paused, feeling the tinny ringing he had felt earlier grow into a louder, more pervasive hum. He could hear Aqualad's voice calling out to him, but it was distant, distorted, like he was trapped underwater, and, try as he might to fight it, the noise just kept building until his ears bled and his mind was overwhelmed. Maelstrom, Aqualad shouted as he dove forward to catch the limp form of his friend and lay him on the ground. Maelstrom, can you hear me? Stand back, Constantine ordered as he crouched beside the shinobi, his finger tracing an arcane symbol in the air. As soon as he was done, he activated the symbol with a softly spoken word and watched as it hovered over the shinobi's head. Oh bollocks. Aqualad turned to the Brit with a concerned frown on his face. What is it? It was Zatanna that answered him as she watched John pull out a salt shaker from his coat. When he put himself directly in the line of fire against the corruption, he took all of the curse right into his mind. The problem now is that the curse is fighting back. And I suppose it will be a bad thing if it wins? Well, that depends. On what? How powerful he is. On my head, Naruto groaned as he sat up, blinking the spots out of his vision as he wondered what had hit him. It took a few more moments, but his vision fully returned. With it came a potent mix of shock, awe and longing that would have floored him if he wasn't still seated on the ground. He was in Konoha. The thought that he could have been mistaken never even crossed his mind. Years of childhood exploration had given him a level of intimacy with his homeland that few could ever claim to have had, and that was before he had shouldered a tremendous portion of the reconstruction projects that Payne's assault had wrought. To say that he knew Konoha like the back of his hand was an underestimation of just how well he knew the land. I thought you might like it. He was up in a flash, his body settling into a defensive stance as he searched for the owner of the voice. Recognition clicked just as he laid eyes on himself. Oh, it didn't matter that this being had crimson eyes or red-tipped black hair. It didn't matter that the whisker marks on its cheeks were more jagged and pronounced or that its fingernails were more like claws. The figure in the anbu outfit was one he had only met once before. Naruto knew that he was looking at himself. It's good to see you again, brother. The warped reflection smiled benignly, though it seemed borderline savage on its face. I had wished for this, of course, but I certainly didn't expect to see my wish granted, so this is a wonderful surprise. Naruto's jaw struggled to form words, his mind still addled by shock. I destroyed you. Come now. The reflection chuckled, slipping both hands into its pockets and forcing Naruto to tense. I am you and you are me. Would a single surprise attack truly suffice in taking us down? Surprise, the shock was shifting now, morphing into anger. What the hell are you talking about? I'll be glad to explain. The reflection pulled out a hand slowly, so as to prevent any attacks, and gestured to the right where an empty cafe sat. Let's get off the road, yes. Naruto's mind was a whirling mass of thoughts as he considered its offer. If the reflection had created this place, then it was possible that it had traps everywhere. The cafe might have been rigged. Yet, something told him that wanton destruction was not the reflection's goal. If so, why bother with the politeness? No funny business, he growled as he slowly inched toward one of the tables set out on the curb. The reflection didn't seem to care for caution, as it chose a table and sat. I give you my word, brother. The reflection's eyes seemed to twinkle as it said this. You understand the weight of that, yes? If you are, in fact, anything like me. Naruto shot back, scowling at it as he slowly sat. So, how is Kagaya? The air around them seemed to grow heavy at that moment as Naruto exerted every last bit of his presence to cower the being opposite him. Do not mention her name. I am you and you are me. There's really no point resorting to childish contests. The reflection just smiled at his reaction before waving dismissively, and to Naruto's unending shock the pressure simply disappeared. I am, however, interested in the fact that you have grown to care for her so much. I'm afraid my nature doesn't exactly lend itself to understanding the more positive side of the emotional spectrum. You seem to be smiling a lot more than our last encounter. The reflection shrugged. When you pulled your surprise attack back at the waterfall of truth, you inadvertently exposed me to emotions I had never quite experienced before. It destabilized me, hence my vanishing back then, but I got a little glimpse at how you see the world and it made me understand your worldview to an extent. Naruto arched an eyebrow questioningly. The reflection's response helped him understand a few things, but it just opened up a new line of questions. You claim to have gained an understanding of my view of the world, but you're still here. If I understand the nature of this visit, you're still opposing me. The reflection threw its head back and laughed, but the sound was just grating to Naruto's ears. You groan, brother. It seems the infusion of Indra's chakra has opened up aspects of your thinking that were stunted. Are we done with the cheap shots? I really did mean that as a compliment, though even I must admit that in hindsight it seems less so. The reflection's grin gradually shifted into a more somber look. So let's get real, shall we? Who is Kagaya to you? Naruto scowled and leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms across his chest. And what the hell is that supposed to mean? Exactly what it sounds like. The reflection fired back coldly as it leaned on the table, peering into his eyes. I've watched you stare at her with fucking moon eyes since we got here. You're falling in love with her. I'm falling in love with— Naruto nearly fell out of heat in incredulity. What the hell do you mean by that? Did I stutter? The reflection leaned back, though the rage was still visible in its eyes. You have forgotten everything that witch has taken from us. Our parents, our world, our friends, our dreams. She cost us everything and you are falling in love with her. Son of a bitch. She's a friend. I may be closer to her than anyone else, but that's fairly fucking obvious considering that she lives in the same apartment as I do and is the closest thing to home. She took you away from home. The reflection screamed wildly, sending spittle flying as it jumped out of its seat. Her greed cost us everything and you're just willing to let sleeping dogs lie? You think you can just fall in love with her after everything she's done? Get this through your skull, Naruto hissed coldly as he stared into his reflection's enraged eyes. I am not in love with Kagaya. The heated face-off went on for what seemed like an age before the reflection threw its head back and cackled madly. You don't realize it, do you? And all this time I thought you were lying to me. You really don't realize it. Seeing the reflection's words as little more than the maddened howls of a rabid dog, Naruto rose up and turned to leave. I'm sure you can. Sit. Naruto's eyes bulged in shock as he felt a tremendous pressure descend onto his shoulders, forcing him to remain in place as his reflection walked around to face him, the Ilto in endless white void. I am you and you are me. Those words aren't the wild yapping of madness speaking. They're fact. It stood before him with its crimson eyes blazing in restrained fury. You are in love with that white-haired demon witch and I'm the only one of the two of us that sees that. Yeah? So what are you going to do about it? Naruto sneered tauntingly at his reflection, only for a barrage of memories to slam into his mind, reminding him of the world beyond his mindscape. Realization dawned on him then and he struggled to fight off the force that held him down, desperate to get his mind back under his command while his reflection stared at him in sick satisfaction. I am you and you are me, the reflection drawled, and for the first time since he had appeared in this mental world, Naruto saw the signs of the corruption's influence. His reflection's skin grew darker and darker as jagged lines of purple slowly dominated its eyes. When next it spoke, Naruto knew that he was quickly running out of time. No more, no longer will I hide in your mind, a mere reflection of your thoughts. It is my time to live and you can be damned sure that I won't ever be anything but myself. It smirked sadistically at him as it stepped back and returned to its seat. Please keep struggling with your own desires, fears and resentment. The longer it takes for you to admit the truth to yourself, the more the leverage you give me over your very soul. Faced with such a terrible fate, Naruto was forced to come face to face with the emotions and memories he had suppressed for so long. It's not good to waste anything, Haim. Even a princess should know that. Don't sneak up on me like that. Oh, geez, Haim, calm down. Besides, if you'd had your guard up, then you wouldn't have been scared by a simple look-see, Her first attempt at cooking, you never cease to amaze me, Kagaya. Remember earlier, when I said that you didn't need to go out of your way to impress me? Well, you've done so twice now and I know you're not even trying. Don't ever change, Kagaya. His words to her after yet another brilliant deduction on her part. Somehow, in the midst of all the chaos, the sight of Kagaya in a pair of short jean shorts, a plain orange top and flip-flops, with flour splattered over her skin and what looked like batter dripping down her hair was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The sight of her in the middle of a chaotic kitchen as she tried her hand yet again at cooking. For the first time since his arrival on this new world, he looked back on his relationship with Kaguya and was forced to face the truth. At some point in time, his simple friendship with her had become something more, something he would never have imagined possible. Love. The heart wants what the heart wants. It was true, yet, not so true at the same time. For every beautiful memory of Kaguya he saw the underlying hate that sought to tear them apart. Their arguments, their fights, the periods of separation. Standing as he did now in the void of his mind, he could finally see precisely what was going on. He had come to love Kaguya as much as he had grown to resent her. I am you and you are me. The words of his reflection, yet carrying a note of absolute truth to them. They were one and the same. Whatever affected one affected the other. He had subconsciously split his own ID into halves and dumped his bitterness, anger and resentment at Kaguya into the other half, and now, thanks to the corruption creeping through the ancient Nervate platform, he was forced to confront his own hate. He loved Kaguya for the woman she was. He hated Kaguya for the demon she had been. Do you see it now, brother? Do you see that I spoke nothing but the honest truth? The reflection crouched before him and stared into his eyes. Kaguya cost us everything, brother. Our parents, our childhood, our friends, home, our dream. Even in this world she has cost us. She had us parade ourselves as her guard, tying our freedom to hers and questioning our decisions at every turn. She doesn't deserve our love, brother, she deserves nothing from us. A part of him agreed with the words of his reflection. After all, nothing it said was completely wrong. However, he could see the jagged purple lines punch deeper and deeper into his reflection's now magenta eyes, signifying that the reflection's will was gradually being subsumed by the corruption. Agreeing to whatever that thing spat out would not end well. Do you remember Rin's words to us when we found out that Levi-chan had wrangled Asagi's apathetic ass into a relationship? Naruto asked as he slowly rose to his feet. The reflection seemed confused by the question and Naruto couldn't hold back a tiny smirk at it. You claim to know me as well as I know myself and you don't remember that night? The reflection's response was to sneer coldly at him. What has that got to do with anything? Everything. Naruto smiled as he came to an epiphany. The heart wants what the heart wants. Sometimes it makes no sense, other times it's perfection at a glance, but in the end Rin's words hold true. Realization dawned on the reflection then and its expression grew grave with horror. No. You were only ever partially correct. While we are bonded closer than anyone else, I am not you, neither are you me, not completely. You are a part of me. A part one sought to hide because I didn't want to face the reality within me. No. The reflection leapt at him, its expression twisted in bestial fury, but, in a mirror of what had happened earlier, it was slammed into the ground as Naruto brought to bear the force of his conviction. Let me go. You were right. Naruto admitted quietly. I do love Kaguya even though I resent her for the pain her actions have caused me. Then let me go. I have the power to destroy her, to remove her from your life. Perhaps, but I wasn't the only one inadvertently affected by her actions, and the entire reason I'm standing here today is because two such people saw past their resentment. It may seem strange, but she isn't in control of her actions, and she hasn't been for centuries. Sasuke, protect her brat. Now that we've freed her, she'll need a friend and I trust no one else but you. Kurama, two others whose lives had been affected by Black Zetsu's plot to return Kaguya to life. If they could see past the resentment to the innocent young woman within, then so could he. You may have taken all that hate and resentment within me to try and turn me, but you just left me with a clear head to see things clearly. Naruto stated, speaking to the corruption that had all but completely taken over his reflection. Thank you, now, be gone. While Wonder Girl, Superboy and Miss Martian hunted down the escapees amidst the labyrinthine passages of the Nirvana platform, the trio of Zatanna, Constantine and Aqualad were neck-deep in an exorcism rite. Having called for the aid of the Atlantean youth due to his experience with sorcery, they had drawn up a magic circle and, with each standing at equidistant points along its circumference, they had begun chanting. The curse that they sought to draw out of the downed shinobi was an aged one, and with that age came power. For all the skill and power they brought to bear against it, the corruption had sunk its hooks deep into Maelstrom's mind and, having tasted the potential within, it absolutely did not want to leave. We're not getting anywhere with this, Uncle John, Zatanna gasped as she dropped to her knees, though she maintained sufficient presence of mind to not breach the line. We don't have a choice, Calder yelled back, even though every fiber of his being screamed for him to simply stop. If that thing gets into Maelstrom, then we're as good as dead. Hey Aquarius, call for your green-skinned teammate. Constantine grunted as he pumped more energy into holding back the corruption's influence. Z's right. We can't hold this up much longer, not like this. He wasn't certain the mystery hero's mind, but what he could sense of the curse wasn't giving him any relief. The curse's influence was spreading. It wasn't so much that their efforts were in vain. They had been instrumental in slowing its efforts down, as much as it was that the curse was simply relentless. For every path they blocked off to force it out, it took 2 more to strengthen his hold. What do you mean? It's trying to take control of his mind, right? Well, a 2-pronged attack. Mental might backed up by magic should shake things up enough for your man to get his shit together. Nothing they had done seemed to help, and John was a firm believer in the little saying that incessant repetition led to insanity. It was better to try a new path than keep slamming a rock wall. Won't McGann be exposed to the same thing we're fighting? He was right, John realized as the biggest flaw in this new path was revealed, but he was nothing if not stubborn. Turning to his pseudo-niece, the warlock adjusted the internal structure of the salt circle from a 3-ended foundation to a dual base, cutting her off from the exorcism. Z. You need to gather as much of your strength as you can from now till the Martian gets here, because you've just been volunteered to play bodyguard. Aquarius, make the call. The young Atlantean was just about to do that when, out of nowhere, Maelstrom's aura surged, ripping through every cell of his body like a storm as his energy essentially purified itself. A pulse of energy rippled out from him, accompanied by a keening wail that deafened the 3 heroes even as they were violently flung away from his prone body. By the time Zatanna regained clarity of mind, the shinobi was on his feet and was already on his way to meet them. Aqualad was beside an unconscious Constantine who had the unfortunate luck of being slammed into a wall by the pulse of energy from Maelstrom. She was just about to try to wake him up when a thunderous retort shook the structure, prompting a long-winded curse from Maelstrom. We've got to get off this thing now. His voice, though urgent, was not as drained as one would have expected. Without the core, I'm pretty sure this thing's about to come down around our ears. He quickly created a pair of clones, much to Zatanna's shock, one of which instantly took off into the depths of the ancient platform. Not even bothering to ask permission, he lifted Constantine and slung him over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, even as his clone did the same, though more gently, with Zatanna, and they tore out of there in a flat-out sprint, Aqualad right on their heels. We need to find Superboy and his group, Maelstrom yelled as another thunderous retort shook the air. I'll try to get them over the comms, Aqualad shouted back, his hand moving to his ear. What they didn't know was that their teammates were already on the move, sprinting through a corridor directly above them, having tracked their friends through McGann's passive telepathy. The Martian's mind was a whirlwind of activity as, while tracking their friends, she was also directing the bioship through the use of its external sensors, getting it to park at one of the many arched exits lining the walls of the platform not too far away, flush with Maelstrom's floor. The shinobi and his group simply needed to make a right turn on their floor, something she had ensured by triggering controlled collapses of some walls and pillars to block off any alternatives, and they'd see the ship waiting. Once they had made it in, she would simply command it to elevate itself until they could jump in. Donna, any idea what triggered this? Superboy asked, grunting as he leapt over a section of the floor that had given way. I mean, things seemed to be going much better a few minutes ago, right? The Amazon hesitated for just a moment, something McGann noticed, and when she responded, her tone was cold and her sentences clipped. They were. They must have something to do with this shaking. Though Superboy didn't seem to notice the way she had spoken to him, McGann narrowed her eyes at Donna. In order to cover more ground during their search for Jinx and her group, the 3 of them had split up. Though herself and Superboy had come up short, when they regrouped, the Amazon had admitted that she had met and fought one of them. She hadn't had the chance to say more when the rumbling yet, she started giving Connor the cold shoulder right after we regrouped. Could it be? A trilling cry from Bioship alerted her to the successful pickup of Maelstrom's group, distracting her from her line of thought, and she swiftly made alterations to the ship's flight path. Bioship's got Maelstrom. Take the first turning to your right. Don't have to tell me twice, Connor shouted as he swatted away a fist-sized rock and took the indicated turning, Donna and McGann right on his heels. There they are. Right down the passageway was another arched exit, and, just a few feet beyond it, was the Bioship, Maelstrom and Aqualad waiting to help them in. Connor was the first to get in, leaping across the gap between the ship and the platform, with Donna going next and McGann simply phasing into her ship. Are we all here? Connor asked as McGann headed to the cockpit. Cause we need to get out of here and get to work on finding Jinx's group. We're here, Aqualad. Maelstrom ascertained. Alright then, Miss Martian, get us out of here, Aqualad ordered. Back on the Nervit platform, the last clone of Maestrom's lifted an unconscious Jade into his arms, carefully holding her in its arms as it analyzed the crumbling structure. Without the main power core to hold it together, the whole thing was showing its age and coming apart at the seams. Boss didn't say anything about the platform. It mused, so the real issue here is what to do. The clone stood there, wondering what step it should take before sighing. Might as well, you never know when something like this will come in handy after all. With his decision made, the clone turned on its Sharingan and activated Kamui, first phasing through the platform until he was standing on the top level before looking down and drawing the structure into the pocket dimension. The process was quick and was completed within a minute, leaving the clone to race off over the choppy waters on its return to land. Why are you so surprised that I'm here? Cadmus created me. Did you honestly think that they'd just let me walk away? Khan Superboy is proof that you could have been something more than whatever the hell they made you to be. Please tell me you aren't that stupid. I shuddered to think of the implications that would mean for me. That would be all. Think, sister dear. Is it not a bit too convenient that the Project Cur simply defied its ingrained programming to join your merry band of child soldiers? Surely someone on your team has noticed that the criminals have suddenly become just a little bit smarter and are now leading you all by the nose. After all, you never saw the Injustice League coming. Donna. The sudden shout, accompanied by the sharp crack of a fingers snapping right before her, pulled the Amazon out of her fugue, forcing her to come face to face with Megan's concerned expression. She knew why the Martian seemed so concerned. Ever since the Nirvana mission, her mind had been stuck on the words of her clone, replaying them at every opportunity and trying desperately to find that slight moment of hesitation, the slightest flicker in the clone's eyes to tell her that she had been spouting lies. It sounds terrifying, doesn't it? The idea that someone you've come to trust so implicitly could be working against you. It did. Everyone, from Maelstrom to Batman, had warmed up to the somewhat broody alien clone who had, despite his often brash and reckless actions, shown himself to be a reliable person. She trained with him, joked with him, watched the quiet pleasure suffuse his face as he stole handfuls of Megan's infamous cookies right off the baking tray. She had seen him at his lowest in the Bialyan desert, little more than an animal thanks to Simon's mental assault, yet she knew the well of potential he had to become an icon much like his parent. You're asking yourself why you should trust me, aren't you? You're desperate to convince yourself that I'm just spewing lies. Let me ask you this. What do I stand to gain from lying to you? Try as she might, Donna didn't know what to do. She hadn't mentioned a word of it to anyone else yet for fear of causing her teammates to alienate him, even though she knew that she had begun to slip into the very behavior she wanted to. Donna. Her eyes snapped back into focus again and she quickly plastered on a faintly apologetic smile to deflect the concern she could see shining in Megan's eyes. I'm here, sorry Megan. I guess I haven't quite shaken off the effects of the fear toxin from. Well, you know what I'm talking about. It was her go-to excuse even though she barely remembered so much as a flash from her time under the toxin's influence. Artemis, Wally and Raven had been quite shaken up by their experiences and it was all too easy to jump on that bandwagon. As always, Megan, bless her innocent heart, took the excuse to be the gospel truth and relaxed her grip on the Amazon's shoulders. Do you want to talk about it? I can't. And that was the actual truth, though her answer had nothing to do with the actual question being asked. I can't even remember what I saw when I was under, but I get these impressions. Maybe I can help, the Martian suggested gently, trying to offer a suggestion yet wary of accidentally bruising her friend's ego. If you let me in. I can't do that to you, Megan. The idea that the Martian's dream guy could be a double agent would cut her to the bone and Donna wasn't ready to have that on her conscience. I mean, what if I pass along some sort of weird, fear-based flu to you? The question was posed in a lilting, teasing tone that told the Martian that she wasn't offended by the suggestion yet wasn't open to it either. It still prompted a laugh, though, and Donna was glad to see that her green-skinned friend was a little less concerned now. Well, Patient Zero, will you at least talk to Black Canary about it? I'm pretty sure she's immune to weird, fear-based illnesses. I'll think about it, Megan, I promise. Sensing a chance to get away from that line of conversation, Donna quickly changed the subject of the conversation. So, what's up? And just like that, the conversation became dour again. Sorry, it's just, there's no one to talk to anymore, Megan said softly, her tone revealing mere fragments of the degree to which she worried. The whole mountain feels so tense. Seeing her often bubbly and cheerful friend looking so downtrodden had Donna clenching her fists in silent frustration. It had been 2 weeks since the Injustice League had made their move and unleashed those plant horrors on the world. In that time, the team had grown fractured thanks in part to the disappearance of Naruto and Kagaya, but more so due to the way the League had essentially relegated them to no more than sidekicks again. It didn't matter that they were the reason the League had uncovered so much information about the shadowy players that they had forced the Injustice Society to show themselves publicly and play their hand. No, as soon as the bio ship touched down and they realized that Naruto and Kagaya had disappeared, it was like a switch had been flipped. No new missions, no communiques. Hell, even Cyborg had been pulled away from the mountain for some reason or the other. Black Canary had become their only link to the League, and it was clear that whatever they were hiding was seriously taking a toll on the blonde. The investigation into Maelstrom's role in the death of the Joker is now classified League business. We will get back to you on the matter as soon as we have made headway. 2 weeks later, they were still waiting and the team was coming apart. At first, it was a general thing. Wally and Artemis were particularly ticked off by the relegation, which was what they were calling it, seeing it as the League deeming them unworthy of sitting at the adults' table even when the situation directly affected them. The rest of them weren't as bothered by the relegation, they hadn't been raised as sidekicks, so they had no reason to think like that, but it certainly didn't paint the Justice League in the best of lights, especially to Raven, who didn't have any direct relationship with a League member. That sense of shared discontentment had become something more volatile when had brought up the root of the matter. Maelstrom Naruto had killed the Joker, breaking what was considered the League's singular unbreakable tenet. Should he then be punished for his actions? It was a laden question, and Donna still remembered exchanging alarmed glances with Calder even as the Atlantean was about to divert the conversation in any other direction, only for that to go up in smoke when Wally flat out made his stance clear. Maelstrom deserved a punishment for that. We don't kill, ever, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If Naruto crossed that line, then he gets whatever the League throws at him. The archer was none too pleased with the redhead's impassioned proclamation, though, and she was quick to fire back at him with an equally fervent argument on how the world was not as black and white as the speedster's naive opinion, and she was quickly backed up by Raven, who had countered Wally's words with a simple, yet cutting, question. If our choice to not kill ultimately leads to the death of thousands, no. If it leads to the death of even a single innocent person, then aren't we as guilty as the killer in question? That had sparked all-out war between the two factions, with a significantly more troubled standing by his friend's side. If we sink to the level of the monsters we fight against, then doesn't that make us no better than monsters? Wally's intractable stance versus Artemis' more realistic view. Raven's harsh question versus ideal. Even though the rest of them were of more varied opinions, or of no opinion until he'd heard from Naruto himself. Which was Connor's stance. The fraction of opinions had affected just about everyone. The mountain were so insanely high that even though they were all present in their home away from home and on a balmy, beautiful, perfect beach day Saturday to boot, the base was almost eerily silent. On some level, I suppose it's a good thing I haven't said a word to Calder or the others about what she told me on the platform. I shuddered to think of how that can of worms would have affected things, and if we had to go on missions. The thought didn't do much to assuage her frustrations. And so, it was almost a blessing of the gods when she heard Cyborg's voice blare out over the mountain's communication systems, asking them to gather together at the hub. Hopefully something would change. 10 minutes earlier. Gotham, are you sure about this, Naruto? Kagaya asked quietly as she prepared a simple salad that the blonde had shown her 2 nights prior. While I stand by your decision to take the Joker off the playing field entirely, I doubt that the team would see it quite so simply. I'm actually expecting to summon Batman the very instant he sees me, while Superboy may straight up just attempt to punch my head clean off. And that's if Artemis doesn't skewer me first. Naruto replied from where he stood, leaning against the worktop beside her. Well, that would make those 2 know better than you, wouldn't it? Though she was obviously joking, the blonde still rolled his eyes at her comment. Well, if they did kill me, I'd utterly deserve it, considering that I bailed on them for 2 whole weeks now more. So if what Canary has told us about the League's decisions is even halfway true. The blonde ran his hand through his hair. During my trips to Gotham, Paula's made it clear that something's terribly off about Artemis. The rhythmic sound of chopping stopped for about a second before continuing. Did Paula give any hints? In her words, Blondie's been cranky, curt and upset, yet, for the first time in years. I can tell that it has nothing to do with the state of our family. I'll give you 3 guesses why she's upset, and the first 2 don't count. Though she doesn't say anything, he could tell that she felt uncomfortable knowing that they had undoubtedly caused friction in the team. Just be careful. She sighed and turned to lock gazes with him. While I agree that they are more mature than the League thinks them to be, they are still skilled, powerful teenagers with varying degrees of control over their emotions. I'll do my best to keep things quiet, Kagaya, I promise, he said before turning away. Thinking that he had left, she turned to pack away the salad and begin cleaning up when he poked his head in. Kagaya? Though somewhat shocked by his unexpected return, she was able to tamp down on her shock and turned to him with a questioning look. Naruto? Did you forget something? Yeah, he started, somewhat shyly. So, I noticed that we haven't really spent time with each other over the past few weeks, what with Pamela, Paula and a bunch of other things taking up most of my time, so I was thinking, there's this quiet little waterfront diner Chloe pointed out to me some time ago. I was wondering if you'd like to go out with me? Kagaya froze. Naruto, noticing her total lack of response, quickly tried to clarify. I mean, just for us to hang out and talk about other stuff, you know, nothing to do with being heroes or the team or even Toad Sage Publishing or anything. Cause we haven't really had time, and I think we should spend a few hours together, but not like a date or whatever, just me and you. Naruto. He winced at her bland tone, knowing that he had messed up thanks to his rambling. Yeah? You asking me out to a fancy diner where we will likely spend the time alone and conversing is the textbook definition of a date, and no amount of rambling or justification will change that. Yeah, you're right. He sighed, knowing that he had seriously screwed the pooch this time. I'll be leaving. That being said, Kagaya interrupted as she turned to face him. To his everlasting shock, and he was stunned enough to actually activate the Sharingan just to verify that he wasn't stuck in an illusion or hallucinating. The white-haired ex-princess was blushing. That being said, I would like to go out on a date with you. The sound of his jaw clanging off the ground echoed through their home long after he had flashed away. Mount Justice present. I can't believe she did that. Naruto muttered quietly as he fought to school his features and hide the glowing blush that even now threatened to take over his cheeks before the team gathered. I mean, if she was going to say yes, then why bother? Naruto, the loud, excited shout yanked him out of his musing and was the only warning he got before being tackled by a green and red blur. His quick reflexes the only reason they didn't go tumbling onto the ground. Where have you been? You've been gone for so long and the league won't tell us anything and there has been so much tension and her rambling gradually drifted off into quiet sobs. Hey again, he smiled sadly as he gently stroked the Martian's back as the rest of the team filed in, their expressions split between annoyance and guarded neutrality. He didn't take note of that, though, as he was still feeling like an absolute dirtbag for upsetting the innocent girl. I am so sorry for upsetting you. It took a few minutes for him to get her to calm down and step away from him and join the rest of the team. The first thing I want to say is that, on behalf of Kagaya and myself, I'm sorry. We knew that we'd hurt you. Even before I showed up here, we knew that we had hurt each and every one of you when we went AWOL and you guys have the right to be pissed off. It was something of a move even if it was a necessity. It was obvious that his apology had taken the wind right out of their sails, Wally and Artemis, in particular, and, for a few moments, the cavern was filled with an awkward silence until Calder spoke up. While the apology is much appreciated, Naruto, I think I speak on behalf of all of us when I say that an apology will not suffice. We each have questions that demand answers. And I'm here to answer those questions, he replied contritely. Though I've gotta say, I'm surprised I haven't been bombarded by the league yet. If the big shots can keep us out of classified league business, then we sure as hell can keep them out of personal team business. Artemis stated flatly, leveling a challenging glare at Wally. Or do you guys also believe we should call for mommy and daddy? Artemis, that's enough. Donna rebuked sharply. We've already spent far too much time divided. Naruto's here and ready to talk, so let's do that. Talk. It had been obvious to Naruto that tensions were flying high from the moment he teleported into the mountain, but he would readily admit that, after seeing that interaction, things were worse off than he had initially thought. Should we do this here or? He decided to leave the choice of the setting to them, partly in deference but mostly to test the waters. If they decided to stay as they were, then things had a chance to go nuclear pretty quickly. We'll hold this discussion in the living quarters, Calder decided. We can get comfortable there. Alright, now that we're all settled in, I suppose I'll start off by clearing the air, Naruto said, taking a moment to ensure that he had their attention before continuing. I killed the Joker. There was a sharp intake of air from each of them. Knowing by virtue of the league's suspicions and their own guesses was one thing. To hear it, straight from the horse's mouth as it were, was jarring. Connor was the first to speak. Why'd you do it? Though Wally looked slightly shocked by the fact that the question was thrown into the air so quickly, it was quite obvious that the Kryptonian clone's words easily echoed the biggest question in their hearts. Why had he gone against the Justice League's rule? To answer them, the blonde thought back to the experiences he garnered over the years. As you guys know, I was trained to fight from a young age and, over the course of my life, I faced three types of evil people. Those who do evil things for their own gain and those who do such things in the name of an ideal or cause. He paused to gauge their reactions and, when he saw no confusion on their faces, he continued. The first two are somewhat understandable and, given the right circumstances, they might even be rehabilitated. If nothing else, Connor knows about a friend of mine who was once a psychotic killer that took lives simply to prove that his existence was superior to others. And you befriended someone like that? Artemis asked, wondering if the blonde wasn't hiding a darker part of himself from them. Naruto just laughed a tad sheepishly. To be honest, I had to kick the ever-loving shit out of his ass to even get him to listen to me. The blonde admitted with a small smile. But then, when he was down, I got him to face the truth and, together with his siblings, we fought to help him change. What became of him? Calder asked, genuinely interested in the tale. He became one of the most loved leaders of his nation as well as a social icon. Naruto replied. He changed so much and put so much effort into becoming a beneficial member of his nation that, by the time they needed a new leader, the same people that had once feared him were the very same that singled him out to lead. Naruto paused and then sighed when he realized that he had gone off topic. Anyhow, while we have gone off track, the point I'm trying to make is that people from the first two groups can be brought back. They can be rehabilitated and they can become decent members of society again. And the last group? Asked quietly, though he had a decent idea what he was about to hear. You haven't said anything about them. People in the third group, they're different, Naruto started quietly. They don't care about anything, they just want to watch the world burn. Money? Power? Both useful but not absolute necessities nor the end goal. Fame? They are often satisfied with whatever degree of infamy that they gain from their actions, but the thought of being forgotten doesn't bother them in the least. People like that don't care how their actions affect others. They gladly toss a baby off a burning building just to see if it splats. Though the rest of the team shuddered in horror, could only shut his eyes tight, trying desperately to keep that thought from sinking in. It had happened once during his early days as Robin. The Clown Prince had, in a fit of deranged boredom, set an apartment complex ablaze and, upon the dynamic duo's arrival, he had literally tossed the child like it was a bag of garbage from the top of the two-story building. None other than Alfred knew of that event and the following argument that had blown up between the Dark Knight and his young protege had, for the first time in his life, seriously considered killing someone. "No offense, bro," a visibly queasy Wally spoke up, "but I don't think even the Joker's that daring." "He is," stated in a deathly serious tone that drew everyone's attention. Just trust me when I say that the Joker is every bit as insane as Naruto just suggested." That forced the speedster's mouth shut in a trice. Naruto continued. "Contrary to whatever the Batman might have suggested." "Yeah, like we're worth the effort to him," Artemis scoffed disdainfully. "Well, that aside, back home, we had a justice system that was quite similar to what you have here. Trials for the accused, remand homes, prisons. It wasn't a perfect copy, but the fundamentals are pretty much the same. That being said, we weren't quite as reticent about dealing the death penalty as the system here seems." "That doesn't provide an excuse though," Wally shot back. "Perhaps," Naruto conceded. "But while I only said that to clarify how things work where I come from, I suppose I should ask you a few questions, Wally." The redhead spread his arms invitingly with a cocky smirk. "Lay them on me." "What's the code of the rogues?" Once again, the blonde threw them all for a loop and Wally needed a couple of seconds to gather himself. "Well, they don't do drugs and they avoid taking a life unless it is deemed an absolute necessity." "And the Joker?" "What? The Joker?" Naruto repeated calmly, focusing on the speedster. "What's his code?" Wally seemed baffled and tried to glance at for help but to no avail. He doesn't have one as far as I know." Naruto nodded slightly. "The rogues are a group of criminals loosely attached, yeah, but a group nonetheless numbering at least 5 members, yes?" "Yeah," Wally did a mental headcount before nodding more firmly. "They're usually more but they're rarely ever fewer than 5. "Alright then. Next question. Who's got the largest body count between the Joker and the rogues? And you're free to take every last one of them into account if you will." The question was little more than rhetoric. Every single one of them in that room knew that the Joker's body count was far and away the largest among the supervillain community. Not even assassins or mercenaries on the level of Deathstroke and his ilk had numbers that high, and they were paid to kill. Most of the rogues were petty thieves on their best day. Coupled with their code, they collectively had the lowest body count of any villain group. "I'm not seeing your point here, man." Wally frowned, crossing his arms across his chest. "Yeah, the Joker has a higher body count. He still gets tried and tossed behind bars, doesn't he?" "Not exactly," Naruto countered with a wan smile. "The Joker has never been considered as being clinically sane. Because of that, rather than being handed over to the justice system to be tried for his crimes, he gets sent to Arkham Asylum to be treated." The shinobi switched his gaze to. "I take it you know the story of Dr. Harleen Quinzel?" "Yeah," exhaled tiredly. He didn't know how the blonde had uncovered the story of Harley Quinn, but, for some reason, he wasn't surprised. "Yeah, I do." "Oh no, please don't bother saying anything to those of yous who aren't privy to bad secrets," Artemis asked sarcastically. Harleen was a doctor of psychiatry in Gotham. She was considered one of the most brilliant minds in her field and was always looking for ways to help those with mental imbalances. Naruto said, choosing to refer to insanity like Pamela had said Harley preferred. When she heard of the Joker, she was sympathetic to his cause and applied to be his personal psychiatrist. By that point, even slowest minds in the room had made all the connections, if the looks of shock were anything to go by. He turned her into that?" Raven asked, horrified, before whirling round to glare at. "And you knew?" "Ray, calm down," Naruto pleaded. He knew how it must have sounded to the incensed girl who had endured her own share of attempts at being broken and remolded into another's image. Harleen's warping, while not conducted like Trigon would have approved, had hit Raven much harder than any other member of the team. "Batman can't be blamed for the creation of Harley Quinn, and we are not here to play the blame game. I brought the matter of Dr. Quinzel up to explain one of the reasons I believe the Joker should not be considered insane." He sat back and rested his palms on his thighs. "Even if the Joker is insane, is that excuse good enough to continue allowing him to destroy lives the way he has been doing?" They couldn't answer. "I won't pretend anything I've said grants me the right to act as judge, jury and executioner. The law should retain that sole right," he admitted. "I killed the Joker because, after being given the chance and the framework to become something better, he proved himself to be irredeemable. I am not proud of it. Of the fact that I killed him, I'm not particularly burdened by it. You don't sir's head and give it more and more chances to kill you. You take it off the plate entirely." That was it. Though he hadn't said or even hinted at it, they could tell that he had said his piece and was now awaiting their responses. The slight issue was that they simply couldn't think up any counter-arguments. For Raven and Artemis, who had rooted firmly for the blonde, his line of thought was proof that he wasn't some unhinged killer like Wally has often alluded to, while, on the other hand, not even Wally could refute the simple logic behind the blonde's words. "If we sink to the level of the monsters we fight against, then doesn't that make us no better than monsters?" S voice was quiet, subdued, yet it clearly cut through the silence. Naruto's voice was just as quiet when he replied, "In a war, when you look at the actions alone, One can easily say either party or the monsters. What separates a hero from a villain is the reason the hero take the decisions he does, and what stops us from becoming monsters are the same things that stopped us from ever choosing the path to evil. Our bonds and beliefs. Our bonds and beliefs? Minato asked, speaking up for the first time since tackling the blonde upon his arrival. What does you mean? Your bonds are the meaningful relationships you've built over the course of your life. Your parents, your closest friends, loved ones, mentors. They are all parts of the important bonds that you create, and, should you ever find yourself becoming something you are not, they'll be there to steer you back. A faint, nostalgic smile lit up Naruto's face as he remembered the very first time he had explained the concept of bonds to Gaara what seemed like a lifetime ago. Though his choice of words back then left much to be desired, somehow, they had stuck with the once psychotic redhead and had helped guide him to a better path. Your beliefs, on the other hand, form the foundation for your moral compass. They are what push you to keep going when all else falls apart. These words had never said to anyone, but, much like his explanation on bonds all those years ago, they were born when he was little more than a child and refined through his experiences. With those two guiding you, even if you have to wade into the heart of darkness itself, you will not be consumed. His piece said. Naruto exhaled and stood up. Called her, Donna, can I speak with you? In private? While the rest of them remained seated, the two oldest members of the team stepped out of the living room and followed him to the room himself and Kagaya shared whenever they stayed overnight in the mountain. Is something wrong, Naruto? Calder asked when they entered the room. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up considering the fact that Kagaya and I will be turning in our membership cards, as it were. So you're leaving then? Donna sighed, having arrived at that conclusion sometime during his conversation with Wally. Yeah, we don't want to, but Kagaya and I realize that, after what happened in Louisiana, our presence on the team could easily lead to problems between some of your mentors and yourselves. Hell, even my coming here was a gamble. The shinobi sighed and ran his hand through his spiky mop of hair. Anyhow, I need you guys to keep searching for links and connections between all the missions we've completed and probably things going forward. Calder seemed perplexed by the blonde's words. With the Injustice League taken down, we've broken the cabal. What else do we have to find? For starters, Naruto smiled wryly. How about the fact that the Injustice League was only a front for what I'm suspecting will be a much more dangerous group? That caught their attention. Then Donna went and dropped a second bomb. Hall of Justice Private Conference Hall. I am still firmly against this, Black Canary snapped, angrily slamming her fist on the table as she glared daggers at the ever-stoic form of the Dark Knight who was seated directly opposite her. It has been 2 weeks. Keeping the team at arm's length serves no purpose at this point. I have already explained this, Dinah. Came the dispassionate response from the Batman. Whether we like it or not, Uzumaki Naruto and Otsutsuki Kagaya have had a great deal of interactions with the team, making them liable to make emotion-based decisions while we're on the field. You taught them well, Dinah. Diana said soothingly, in a bid to mollify the blonde. However, we can't predict the actions of teenagers, you know that. It's bad enough that they're constantly bothering us for information. That much was true, Dinah admitted to herself. Artemis had, over the past 6 days, dropped increasingly unsubtle hints that she knew something was up. From seemingly casual questions to borderline annoying comments on how beneficial his training had been to the team, it was glaringly obvious that she was making a case for the Offworlders' continued presence at Mount Justice. Heck, it had gotten Oliver's attention, though her partner mostly overlooked it as something to do with the team which was more her thing than his. In this case, however, Dinah could easily understand the team's desperate desire to know. Unlike most members of the Justice League, she had a bit of an understanding of what it was like to have information withheld from her. Her mother had done it all the time in her glory days after all. She hadn't liked it then and she was damn sure that the team weren't appreciative of being kept out of the loop now. Yet she knew just how stubborn the Dark Knight could be and she was certain that Wonder Woman would remain supportive of keeping the team at arm's length for as long as he did. As such, she decided to try a different approach. Alright, even if you don't agree with bringing them in completely, we should at least give them something. What do you mean? Feeling encouraged by the fact that Diana was at least willing to hear her out, the blonde pushed forward. Look, the team hasn't heard a word from us in the past 2 weeks. Well, they haven't heard from you, she amended mentally. And, thanks to Artemis, I know they're going stir crazy from not knowing. I say we should head back to Mount Justice and just let them know we haven't forgotten or abandoned them. Heck, we can even let them know how far we've gotten. Lord knows we haven't made much progress. Basically, we should do what you've been doing over the past 2 weeks, the Dark Knight said in a tone that was more of a statement than a question, prompting an eye roll from Dinah. Well, since everybody knows about it, yes. Let's do what I've been doing, she replied with an exaggerated drawl. If nothing else, it'll ensure that we won't be seen as assholes anymore. Diana winced at the blonde's pissed off tone. Not very subtle, Dinah, but you're right. We have kept them at bay enough. The team at least deserves to know that our efforts have so far been fruitless. Knowing that he had been outvoted, the Batman couldn't help but chip in. I hope you're ready to deal with loads of teen angst. I think we can handle it. Dinah shot back. We deal with you, don't we? Mount Justice recognized. Batman. P01. Wonder Woman. P02. Black Canary. S02*. When the glow of the teleportation platform officially named Zeta Platform died down, the League members were faced with an empty hub and a silent base, a sight that had Dinah sighing in frustration. "I'm pretty damn certain that they're all on site today," she explained, leading her companions toward the living quarters. "The thing is, they've been having internal issues regarding how to proceed over this current issue, and it's seriously affecting their social skills." Diana arched an eyebrow. "So, they're sulking?" Dinah sighed again, this time in exasperation as she reached for the door leading into the team's living space. "Please don't let them hear you." Between Dinah's words and their experiences with their own protégés, both Diana and Bruce were expecting a heavy, tenthy team wherever they were gathered. So it was particularly jarring for them to observe the members of the team moving about with a focused intensity, little to no tension hanging around to be felt by the League members. "What the hell, okay, I was not expecting this." Dinah's murmurs trailed off as she took in everything before her. Donna and Raven were engrossed in a game of chess while Wally, Calder and Artemis had what seemed to be a serious discussion without any of the friction she had sensed from them less than 48 hours ago. The only two whose behavior matched what she had come to expect over the past week were McGann and Connor, whose voices she could hear from the kitchen, accompanied, as usual, by the rich smell of fresh baked goods. Batman, of course, simply dove right in, not seeming bothered by the generally relaxed atmosphere. "If you could all spare 5 minutes of your attention." The Dark Knight's commanding tone was, as usual, attention-grabbing, and those present in the living room immediately focused on the new arrivals, their eyes growing wide in shock at the identities of their guests. They scrambled out of their seats post-haste, Artemis hollering for their kitchen-dwelling friends as she moved, and gathered round the League members. They remained quiet, though, and that bothered Dinah. After nearly 2 weeks of not hearing anything officially, anyways, they should have been jumping at the chance to hear something. "Our investigations into the death of the Joker and the possible connection to Maelstrom and Shard have been so far fruitless," the Dark Knight stated tersely. Part of the reason for his reticence in telling the team of the League's inability to find the extra-dimensional duo was personal pride. He was often considered the world's greatest detective, so for two people whom he had helped settle in to have disappeared so thoroughly that he couldn't find a trace was galling. Artemis' mutter of, "Gee, who didn't see that coming," didn't help. Luckily, Diana chose to continue, saving the blonde from what could have been a cutting response, though the Dark Knight's glare didn't go unnoticed. "We understand how discontent you must feel with such lackluster results on our end, but a wise friend advised us to communicate with you. As such, know that the isolation period is officially over." "Then we will be permitted to begin our own investigations?" Calder asked haltingly, knowing that he was definitely pushing the envelope with his request. Astoundingly, Diana spoke up again, overriding Batman's harsh, "No," with an even more forceful, "Yes." That left everyone, Dinah included, slack-jawed. The Amazon immediately pushed forward, capitalizing on the fact that she had the shock factor in her favor. "Going forward, you will be carrying out your own investigation into cases that you believe are worth looking into, the caveat being, of course, that you will keep us up to date on your findings." Diana found sometime during her impromptu decision that she couldn't stop smiling proudly at these young ones. Theirs was not the normal life that their peers enjoyed. Instead, they bore the burden of soldiers, fighting on for a cause that was far greater than they were. Through it all, they showed the zeal to do their part, sometimes doing beyond what was simply theirs, with courage and determination, yet they still showed their childish sides. Seeing her young protégé standing with them, she knew once more that her decision to allow her join the team was the right one. "You may be our protégés, but you are not simple sidekicks, not anymore. Over the past few months, you have shown that you are responsible and mature beyond your youth. Now we're giving you a chance to step up, take on a greater burden and grow." Her gaze swept around the room, locking eyes with each of them for a few seconds to convey her confidence in them. "We'll be in touch." With that said, she turned around, subtly pushing the Batman to do the same, and began to walk away. "If it is no trouble, we would like to speak with Black Canary for a while to discuss the logistics of this new arrangement." Seeing nothing wrong in the Atlantean's request, Diana agreed and continued dragging the Batman away. Just before they Zeta tubed away, the Dark Knight leveled a glare at her. "I would prefer not to be undermined in such a manner, Diana." The Amazon rolled her eyes, though she sported a teasing smirk, "Teenagers." Back in the living room, Dinah was nursing the mother of all headaches as Calder wrapped up his little confession. "So he was here?" "Yes, today." This time, the Atlantean chose to nod. Dinah found herself unable to simply explode in righteous fury, though she couldn't tell whether it was due to how contrite they seemed or the fact that she had for some inexplicable reason expected that blonde bastard to pull something like this off. "He wants me to choose, that idiot," she thought, frustrated by his subtle manipulation. "He wants me to pick a side. Either the League or the team." After quickly running the two options side by side, she found herself restraining the urge to groan out loud. If she reported his jaunty little visit to the bat, she would undoubtedly lose every crap of trust the team had in her, making her den mother duties, which, thanks to the Mr.'s very own Miss I make important decisions on my own, are now even more, immeasurably harder. On the other hand, keeping things quiet meant that should Batman ever find out, and he would eventually, she knew the League would almost certainly start looking at her a little more coldly. Decisions, Bealia Ophelia Gardens, Bealian Royal Palace. Gizmo's skill with technology never ceases to amaze. Vandal Savage stated with a small smile, the little cube he held in his hand dwarfed by the hand in question. To think I only provided a description of what I wanted him to do. Seated opposite him at a secluded table in her preferred relaxation spot was the exquisite form of the Bealian queen, her diaphanous gown swaying in the gentle night breeze. While I am impressed by his work, Master Savage, you will have to explain what your endgame here is. She had been roused from her workstation only a few minutes prior, and the knowledge of the reports she still had to go through before even attempting to get a few hours rest left her with a slightly curt disposition. Patience, Your Majesty, patience. He chuckled as he gently placed the cube on the table and touched a barely visible switch on the side. The vertices of the cube gave off a saffron glow that pulsed twice before the object suddenly expanded, growing to about 5 times its original size and resting at about 3 feet to a side. Within the expanded cube strobed the nebulous, iridescent glow of the Nirvana power core. My lady, I give you the Nervit Codex. Dark eyes shot to him, intrigued as much by his words as by the flashing object in its cage. I thought you called it a power core. A necessary omission to conceal the importance of this find. Savage replied coolly. While it was the power core for the Nirvana platform, it served a more important role. Embedded into the power matrices are every last scrap of information the Nervit saw worthy of being preserved. Their history, culture, innovations, all trapped in here. The Queen understood the Immortals' unspoken words. Trapped in that glowing ball was all the knowledge of the Nervit, and knowledge equaled power. If they were even half the people you made them out to be, then such knowledge will be sealed beneath countless forms of encryption. Between Clarion, Cobra and the brain, I'm certain it'll be decrypted in a trice, Savage stated factually. I'm assuming you have a specific subject you'd like to find out from these ancient tomes? Apotheosis. A slim, arched eyebrow was her response to his answer, and he couldn't help but smile. That's the closest word in the English vocabulary to the ancient Nervit art of creating metahumans. I supward, indeed. Vandal sat back and gazed at the twinkling stars above for a few moments before returning his focus to her. Ever since the advent of heroes, governments around the world have been in a silent race to create their own super soldiers, and while interest in newer and more unique forms of artillery will always remain, few would resist the chance to purchase their very own metahumans. Should I take that as the green light then? Yes. Between Cadmus, your outpost, and Cobra's base, we will have complete monopoly over the metahuman trade without giving away the fact that we are interconnected. And the heroes? I don't understand. The dark-skinned woman sighed tiredly, knowing that this would be a long night and wishing she could simply skip her duties and head to bed. Alas, the burden of the crown. The timing of the Joker's death could not have been a coincidence. Our analysts have already agreed that the clown was almost certainly killed, an action that, a year ago, would have been considered impossible considering what we knew of the Justice League. Now, though, it seems as though everything we knew about them is being turned on its head. The Joker's death is currently an outlier event, and while our plans have stumbled over the past few months, it has primarily been as a result of the band of sidekicks as opposed to the League itself. Though Vandal seemed calmly dismissive of the whole thing, that was simply a facade, hiding the bubbling rage he felt inside. Though the Joker wasn't one of his pawns, the Clown Prince had been his most effective card at diverting the Batman's attention when he needed to make certain moves that might have been drawn to the Dark Knight's attention, and his death had come at quite the inopportune time. Nevertheless, plans are already in motion to deal with them.